All right. See if we got everything set up here. Looks like we've got audio, video, and all of that. Greetings. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. It's Good Friday today, I think, right? I don't know. Fishy Ash, greetings. Thank you for the kind regards. Welcome as well, of course. Juki, Fluffy Quack, Sam Hine, Killick, Mudbound Dragon, lurkers in chat, VOD viewers, and everybody else. Hope you're all doing well. I'm all right today. It's been a rough week. I'm not going to dwell on any of that really, but I will. I'll do a little bit of the traditional airing of grievances at the top of the stream. Although it's not really airing of grievances so much as just I'm relieved and glad to finally have been able to go through some computer surgery that I've been putting off for a very long time. It was kind of necessitated by the ghost of my fucking ancient... Well, they're not even ancient, they're just bad. But it's a lingering problem for a long time. I had a couple of M2 drives that were causing a lot of problems, and what I ended up doing was I ended up disabling them. So I got like I had two separate 2 terabyte M2 drives internal, and one of them started causing problems, and then the other one started causing problems, so I eventually decided that I basically couldn't use them. So it was a little expensive to try to replace them both at once, so I got a single 2 terabyte drive, and what I did was I installed it, but I couldn't uninstall the old drives at the same time because I needed to transfer stuff off of them. And if you've never installed or uninstalled an M2 drive, I guess it'll depend on the way your motherboard is designed, but as a general rule, it's quite awkward, because you basically slot them right into the motherboard, and at least on my PC, they are about the least accessible thing you could possibly imagine, because the slots are positioned not just like behind the PCI cards, but it's under this like heatsink thing. So it's a whole process of removing your GPU and then like unscrewing this heatsink thing and then unscrewing each drive. And I mean, as far as before I even got to that part, just like unplugging and like, I don't know, I always find it to be such a gigantic hassle to have to unplug my PC and open it up and do anything with it, but I always put it off for a very long time. But so because I couldn't remove the drives before I had gotten the stuff I needed off of them, I installed the first replacement drive, and this was like, I don't know, a year ago, probably more, and transferred everything I needed to the new drive. And luckily in Windows you can just you can disable a disk drive. You don't have to use it just because it's physically connected. So I disconnected, like I disabled one of the 2 drives, and I can't remember exactly. I think at the time I was still under the assumption that I could maybe make use of one of the... So as it turns out, like, they were Kingston drives, and those are apparently just notoriously trash. And as far as my like more recent research, I guess, like, it seems to me that the general consensus is like, if you're getting an M2 drive, you should get a Samsung, and like that's it. I figured Kingston are at least a brand name that I recognize, so I would think that they would at least work, but it turns out that was too much to hope for. The replacement one I got back then, I think, is a Corsair, and it's been it's been working since then, but knock on wood. But in any case, what it ended up doing sooner or later was that I disabled both of the drives. I think there was also a thing where, actually, I think what I had done, now that I'm thinking of it, I think I had already disabled the one drive that was the most problematic before I bought the replacement. But when the second drive started becoming more of a problem, I figured, fuck it, I have to put in a replacement and transfer everything over. But because I couldn't physically tell which drive was which, like, I left both of them in, even though one of them was already not in use. I think that's what it was. And ever since I disabled that second drive, like, they've not caused a single problem since. But in the last week or so, I've noticed weird shit happening. So what used to happen, the problem with those drives is that there's like something about them that if you go to whatever it's called in the like task manager or like performance monitor, whatever in Windows, you can see disk, access percentage or whatever, like how much the drives are working. And like those numbers shouldn't go up super high. I mean, obviously, in like if nothing's happening, it shouldn't be doing anything. But even when you're like copying files or writing to a disk, like the disk activity usually doesn't like max out. But what would happen with these drives is that with nothing happening, with nothing going on, activity would just... I'm trying to find the word for it. I would use the word spike because they would go immediately to 100%. But spike implies that it drops down. It wouldn't. It would just, go up to 100. And the graph that you can see over time, it would just be like solid green because it would just max out at 100%. And it could stay there for minutes. And it would kind of go... It would get worse over time. So like the first time it happened, and that's the issues that I started noticing now recently, is that like you notice a stutter. Like especially if you're watching a stream or a video or something, and like more likely than anything, you'll notice that the audio stutters. And that is because like this one drive is like cranking up its activity so high that it's like literally causing the entire PC and the operating system to just grind to a halt. And I was like so confused over what this was, and if memory serves, when I first tried to do research on it, I didn't really find any conclusive answers. But when I did it, like another round of research later, I did find multiple reports that this is like a recurring issue with Kingston drives. And it's like, apparently, it's more likely to happen the more full the drive is. So, like, naturally, when you just got a drive, there's not much on it, like, it'll perform just fine. But in my case, it was a matter of months before they, something started acting up. And it took a while for me to identify what the problem even was. But eventually it became clear, and it kept getting worse. But yeah, so it's like a thing. And like I said, my Corsair drive that I've had for I don't know how long, quite a long time at this point. Certainly longer than like, it hasn't shown any problems yet, and it's got a better track record in terms of how long it's been performant than my Kingston drives did. But I got the Corsair one because at the time I wasn't aware about the consensus that Samsung are like the ones you should get. But like I said, it's been fine. My system drives a Samsung, and that's been completely fine. It caused, like, I don't know, some of you guys may remember this, like, because when I was streaming, like, this would happen, like, my stream would just hang, like, my computer would just sort of freeze for seconds and occasionally minutes at a time, and it depended on, like, because the drive would get all messed up, like, anything that used that drive would sort of freeze. So my operating system would generally be fine because it was on a separate drive. But OBS or a lot of stuff like the graphics and other files that OBS are using for my overlays and stuff were on a drive that had these issues. So it would make OBS like freeze even when my computer was being responsive. And it would just make my stream like drop. I can't even say drop frames, drop just stream. I want to say that at times like the audio would go through, but not the video. Like it was all fucked up. But even just like using the computer privately, like once I started hearing those stutters happen again over the last week or so, I'm like, fuck, okay, this is bizarre. Because again, after I disabled the drives, nothing happened. What's up, little conductor? Greetings. But so I looked into it again. I used the same kind of troubleshooting method that I'd used in the past.
Unspeakable horror awaits you.
Conductor with the Prime sub. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Very kind of you. So I used the same troubleshooting method of using the task manager to just look at the performance monitor thing, and I was kind of puzzled because I'm like, will I even be able to look at this? I know that the drives that caused problems in the past weren't even connected. But lo and behold, even the drives that aren't, that didn't have a volume in Windows or weren't, enabled, they still came up in the list of drives, and I could see that, this unallocated drive had activity that, spiked at 100%, that, corresponded to the stuttering that I was experiencing. So I was like, what the fuck? This drive isn't even in use. It's not even doing, it's not even on standby to do anything, and it's, causing my PC to seize up. So I was like, all right, fuck it, that settles it. I need to get these drives out of here. And so the thing is, I had bought a Samsung drive for my second sort of replacement drive a long time ago at this point, but knowing what an absolute pain in the ass it is to change those drives, I just put off installing it for months because I was kind of making do. I wasn't in desperate need of that disk space. But when those ghostly hauntings of weird freezes started happening again, I was like, all right, that's it. And yeah, so I spent this morning performing that little bit of surgery, and I'm very relieved to have it all done, and that it's everything appears to be working. But it's also this is right on the heels of me replacing a monitor and having to change some Windows stuff. Did I figure out the stutter? Is it a mechanical issue or firmware? No, it's not mechanical in this, it's not a moving part, because it's an M2 drive. It's a solid state drive, but it's literally it's not a fixable issue. You could save, I don't know. I updated firmware, I tried doing all those things, but it nothing works because it's just hardware faults. It's just a feature of those Kingston drives that they just fuck up your computer and don't work properly. That's the best answer I could come up with based on my research. It was not a solvable, well, it is a solvable issue, but the solution to the issue is get rid of those drives and get better ones that actually work. That's, people far wiser and more knowledgeable than me arrived at those conclusions. But all of my personal findings were in complete alignment with the information that I could find, which to begin with was very I couldn't find a lot of info, but when I looked at it a couple of months later, I was able to sort of find more information on it. And yeah, the simple answer is basically, yeah, they're trash. I mean, like I said, I trust people who know more about it than me. And I'm not really interested in trying to fix it if it's going to be a bunch of extra work. If I could get those drives to work, that'd be good, but I'd rather not have to worry about it. But literally, of all types of storage media I've used over the decades, those two drives are hands down the worst and quickest failure I've ever had on any kind of storage media. They lasted months before they started acting up to the point where not only was the storage unreliable, it made using my PC barely doable. In a way, you could say that it's a better kind of failure than flat out just implosion, because I could at least get the data that I needed off of the drives and get rid of them. But for them to start exhibiting those kinds of problems that quickly is completely inexcusable. Anyway, I'm glad to have that done, and And again, like that wasn't really a pressing issue currently, like the drives being a problem, because I'd mostly solved that problem previously. It was just a matter of the extra lingering effects that somehow showed up that gave me the excuse to get, you know, to physically disconnect them and to install the other drive that I'd had sitting for a long time. But it is funny that it just happened to coincide. Like my monitor started having a lot of problems a couple of weeks ago, and that started being untenable, so I finally just gave in and bought a new monitor, which I'm pretty happy with so far. We'll see. I have not yet tried it with my capture card video pass-through, so I have no idea how it's going to handle that, and I hope that it handles it well. I know that my previous monitor didn't always like there was some quirks, but I had that for a couple of years, and you know, I got used to it and it was fine. But it's going to be extremely annoying if it turns out that there's something that makes this like a lesser experience. I mean, the thing is, like, I won't know those kinds of things until I have a monitor in hand that I can use and see how it, you know, handles. I think it's difficult to find information about those kinds of things ahead of time, so it kind of is what it is. It's a little bit of a crapshoot. The funny thing is, I know that the monitor I used up until now, I got used to it at this point that I don't even remember exactly what the annoyance was, but I do know that the monitor I had before that had some features that my previous monitor that I then advanced to did not have, which made me a bit annoyed. There was like an older monitor I had a switch to display, like it would squash the screen to 4:3, which was a very convenient feature because, you know, it's not uncommon to come across video content and stuff that's just stretched to 16:9, and to have it on the monitor and on just a button to squash it was very good. But it also could be useful for like certain capture things where I could, like, it would be easier to maybe capture something and like transform it to 4:3 for OBS and then not have to worry, like just do it in the monitor on my end, which I wouldn't be able to do without that feature and things like that. But also I think there was like changing inputs and muting and stuff that I didn't have on immediate buttons that I have to like navigate in the OSD menu to do. And because this is a fucking gamer monitor, it's so stupid and I'm already annoyed with it. I have like a quick access button to enable a fucking crosshair on my monitor. And I have another quick access button that I think is to like cycle between a couple of different like gamer modes that I don't even know what they do. I do think that there's a button to let me cycle through inputs, so that's good at least. But there's like no button to mute audio. And it's like the idea that, like, I don't know. I guess if you're the kind of person that wants to make use of a feature in the monitor to put like a crosshair, yeah, maybe you would want that on a hotkey to toggle it quickly. But it's such a useless feature. And it's such, like, it's bizarre for me to imagine it being so prioritized that you would put it that way, but whatever. Colors look good to me, and it's 240 hertz. It seems performant, and it's not having any issues that I was having with my previous monitor or the extremely shitty budget monitor I used as a stopgap while I was waiting for this one to arrive. But yeah. And I mentioned this a little bit on Discord. I might have mentioned it on stream. I don't recall, but there was a Windows update that broke the program I was using to like unfuck a bunch of Windows 11 features. So I have Windows 11, and as far as operating systems go, as far as Windows versions go, I've been mostly fine with it. But there's a couple of Windows Explorer stuff that I just drove me nuts immediately, and one of them being that they changed how the taskbar works. Most crucially, they removed the functionality of being able to put the taskbar on the, like, vertically on the side of your monitor, which I've been doing for like 20 years. So that right off the bat was a deal breaker for me. But so I was using a program called Explorer Patcher, which basically, so the thing is, like, there are, or were at least, a lot of previous, like, I don't know if it's a compatibility thing or just the way Windows is built, but there's a lot of functionality from previous versions of Windows that are like still in Windows but aren't used or aren't you know, sort of propagated to the user. But using these programs, you can kind of hook into those older versions of displaying the start menu and the taskbar and the sys tray and Explorer windows and whatever else. But Explorer Patcher, for whatever reason, its method of bringing back the old taskbar broke in this Windows update. So I had to swap to a different program called Start All Back, I think it's called. Yeah, Start All Back. Which from the looks of things appeared to have more options really than what I was using, so it's not a bad thing. But everything is like a little bit different. But it's just funny that like the Windows Update taskbar thing, my monitor breaking, and the ghost of the old SSD all happened within like the span of a week. And actually, I even had a fan in my computer case die as well, I noticed. I tried to poke at it a little bit when I was digging my PC. I couldn't really do anything about it. But yeah, so I had these like 4 different computer failure things just happen completely independent of each other, like basically right at the same time. So it's kind of weird. Like it almost feels like it doesn't really feel like I'm using a new computer, but it's it's a weirdly similar feeling to like I have this new monitor. Like my Windows is a little bit different now, and I now have like 2 terabytes of extra storage. It's a little weird, but you know, like I said, where I'm at now, it's not really a matter of airing grievances. It's just you know, dealing with the frustration of all the effort and hassle you have to go through to get this shit set up. But hopefully that's mostly behind me at this point, so I can just enjoy the fruits of my labor. So with that out of the way, I've been live for a little bit. We've let people drop in. We can move on to what we're really here for, which is indeed MTI. The return to Persia. Let's hop on over here. For those unfamiliar, we started the exploration of ports early this year, I want to say. I don't even barely remember myself, but I want to say that we started in January. And we got through a couple of streams before I had to take a break from streaming for a variety of reasons. And we are back, and after conquering... Well, sure, let's call it conquering. Return to Dark Castle, which is an absolute god game, by the way. I'm very excited to finally return to Prince of Persia. Oh yeah, I should mention too, I'm realizing as I'm looking at my OBS preview, because my camera is mounted to the monitor, like switching monitors means like figuring out where the fuck the camera goes and everything, so my layouts might be a little weird, but should be fine. What's up, MP83? Yeah, people are welcome to join and lurk for whatever reason. That's I don't judge. But yeah, so I did, and I don't have a super handy like command for this or anything, but bear with me for a moment. Let's see if I can figure this out. Is this I think this link would work. Let me just double check before I post anything. Hang on. Actually, let's do... Well, okay, I can... Let's post that link right there. That should take you to my channel. Since the Twitch VODpocalypse, YouTube is now where VODs go, but it takes a bunch of effort to post things and to... I just realized... Did I not publish the 5th one? Well, okay, I'll figure that out. There's a couple of extra steps, so I tend to be a little lazy with getting stuff published. I'm gonna super forget this, so let me just do this. Did I literally only do... That doesn't make sense at all. I'm sure I'm so confused right now. Okay, yeah, I just never set it to public because I'm an idiot. Okay, yeah, let's do that then. boom, live premiere of my 2-month-old VOD. It should be there now, part 5. So if you missed previous streams, they are now on YouTube, and you can go watch them there. So, what are we doing here? We are exploring 24 different versions of Prince of Persia. Namely, where are we? There we go. These ones over here. What's up, Jimmy Poopins? I should hydrate a little bit. We're going to be playing these in mostly, to the best of my ability, chronological order. And we've been going through the list from the beginning. As we've played each game. The way we've been doing this, basically, is doing a single run of each game. Some of these are going to be pretty impossible to complete because they're all kinds of fucked up. So I'm definitely not committing to completing each game, but we're giving it a proper, full, play session. And for every game that we complete, there's a little trophy to indicate that we managed to complete the game. The skull indicates that we did not manage. And this is not going to hold up completely, but in a very, very simple binary kind of way, you can kind of see it as, if I can complete the game in one run, it's probably a decent port, or at least it plays properly. If I'm unable to finish the game, it is likely because it's a fucked up port in some way. I mean, I know the game pretty well, I know the levels, I know how to complete the game, provided that it functions as it's supposed to. But in slightly more granular review scale, we got the little emojis to explain how I feel about
a box?
Each of the games. Box art review. We can get to that. I've been hesitant to get too sidetracked with stuff recently, so I almost feel bad. We'll do that, sure. But let me just finish up here first. Many of these versions on the list, both of the ones played and ones yet to be played, many of them I'm familiar with previously, many of them I am not. One of the most sort of exciting things for me going into this project was finally getting to check out the Japanese computer versions, which I knew of and thought of highly, but I hadn't actually played them properly. And completely unsurprising, the PC98 version was like phenomenal. And the other Japanese PC versions are basically ports of that, so they're not going to offer anything too much unique. But you'll see, because we'll be playing the FM Towns version today, and it's going to be a banger. I can say that much. But the other version I was excited to check out was the Atari ST version, which, as you can see in my little review scale there, I really, really like. It does have issues with slowdown, and I don't know if that's something you can mitigate, whether on real hardware or with emulation. But that aside, I really love that version because it's the most sort of distinctive, certainly of the Western computer ports. It has completely unique graphics, and it had some cool sound. And it's an interesting version that I think is definitely pretty overlooked. But as far as what's remaining, I'm very excited to check out all of the fan-made like homebrew ports. As you can see from some of the release dates, you may realize that the 2011 Commodore 64 version is not a commercial release. Neither are the BBC Micro or Atari 8-bit versions. Or for that matter, the 1996 ZX Spectrum version. I imagine all of those are going to be quite good, because I think anyone who's going to endeavor to make something like that in, well, I say modern times, 1996 is 30 years ago. They're not going to do, well, they might do a half-assed job, I guess, but it's like, it's going to be a passion project, and it's going to most likely be people who know the game quite well. And the same cannot be said for a lot of the official ports that came out. So it's going to be really cool to see how the game handles, and you know, by necessity, all of those versions are going to have quite sort of unique visuals. Now, I think the Atari 8-bit version is more or less completely based on the BBC Micro version, so those might not be that different from one another. But I don't know any of these computer platforms that intimately, so whether they're the same or not, I'm interested in looking at and seeing what we can find in terms of differences and similarities. Yeah, exactly, MP83. Like, there's no external pressure to limit how it turns out, sort of. At least not in the same way. What's up, Icarus? But what I can say for sure is, of all the remaining versions, is that they are going to absolutely run the gamut of quality, just like the first half has, really. The Game Boy version is like astonishingly bad. It's just infuriating. The Sam Coupe version has a lot of fucked up things about it. The CPC version is kind of baffling, even if it's not as outright bad as some of the others. And I know that some of the ones ahead of us they're kind of similar. We're gonna have some similar experiences, I think. Now, we're doing this project, well, because I wanted to, and I have been wanting to for a long time, but I had this as kind of a subscriber goal thing for my birthday stream back in September. And another goal that I set and was reached at that time was committing to a proper, full, legitimate clear of the Super Famicom version, which is something I have never done. I've completed the game, but not in a single session. If you're unfamiliar, the Super Famicom version is basically a completely different game. Many people are aware that the Super Nintendo version has additional stages, which is true, but it also does not contain any of the original stages in their original form. Every single level, to my knowledge, there may be some... It's possible, like, stage 6 is the same or something like that, which is like a very short stage that has like one boss fight in the original. But I don't think so. From my memory, every single stage... Like, there are stages in that game that are clearly based on stages from the original. Like, the first stage is a good example. The first half of stage 1 in the Super Nintendo version is basically the same as the original, but then instead of the sword being on the floor, you go through this like underground tunnel, and it's like vastly extended.
Good to see you back, dude. Looking forward to more pop.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I am as well. I'm looking forward to this. So it's a massively extended game. It's much longer, and generally every stage is also more difficult. Every stage is longer, and the last couple of stages, the final stage, is like really difficult and punishing in a way that the original stage, like the final level has a bunch of soft locks basically, which it's not a totally absent thing. Like, certainly in level 12 in the original, there's a bunch of like loose tiles. I mean, not just level 12, but you know, there are loose tiles that you can drop that make certain jumps impossible and things like that. But the final level in the Super Nintendo game has a bunch of like doors that lock behind you, and you have to do things in the correct order, and it's especially at the very end of the game, like, it's a very high pressure kind of situation. But I think it also makes that game satisfying in its own way to do a proper full playthrough of, in a way that's totally distinct from every other version, because again, it's a different game. For all intents and purposes, it's basically the actual Prince of Persia 2. Because the official Prince of Persia 2 is, I don't know, it's not that great. Of course, it isn't a sequel because it's the same story and, you know, has overlap, but it's enough of a different beast that I consider it a different game. But of course, as far as this project goes, as far as how it's promoted and sold and released, it is considered... It's fair to consider it a port or a, you know, version of the original game. In any case, because I that goal was reached, I have made a promise, I guess we can call it, to do a proper, like, single, well, not single life, but, you know, single sitting, start to finish, no passwords playthrough. That will not be part of this exploration. And I say that just because, like, I know that it's going to be a commitment. It's going to take multiple streams. I'm excited to do it. It's going to be super fun, but it's going to drag down kind of the pacing of everything else if we're going to stop to do that. It's going to be like 5 streams of that version and like 8 streams of everything else. So just to kind of set expectations. But I'm looking forward to that as well. It's a great game in its own right, even though I can't consider it like really a version of the original. And that's part of why I find this so fascinating, why I enjoy doing this so much, that there really isn't a definitive version of Prince of Persia. There's a lot of versions that are great, but many of them have something interesting about them that are missing in other versions. Even some of the bad versions have things that are cool. The Mega Drive version is like kind of my favorite in some ways. It has my favorite graphics. It has a really kind of cool, elaborate intro. And the PAL version in particular has 4 unique extra levels, which they're not all great, but it's a cool extra little thing. But mechanically, it's like completely broken. So there are, you know, I would say that the PC98, or honestly, maybe actually the FM Towns version, is like one I would recommend to people to play. And that's the thing, like, there are plenty of versions I can recommend, but it would all be with the little asterisk of, but here's these like other 8 versions that you should also play because they're good. But I like that. I think it would be boring. Like, that's the thing, there are many games that have a lot of different ports, but very few of them, I don't know, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of something like Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 has a lot of different versions, but there isn't really many versions, at least, that are unique to the point where they're like that interesting to look at. I mean, you have to be a really big nerd to find, like, I would find every version interesting. But for 99% of people, if they wanted to play Street Fighter 2, I would just say, well, you should play the arcade version. You know, the variety of commercial releases of it being emulated and whatever, but like, I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend the Amiga version or the PC Engine version or the Game Boy version or the Brazilian Master System version, you know, unless it's a very specific demographic. But with Prince of Persia, it's a totally different story because a lot of the versions, like the DOS version, is the version that most people are the most familiar with, and it's great. But there's so much more out there, like, that feature really cool things that aren't in that version. Like, honestly, I think as fine of a port as it is, I might... No, well, okay, that's not fair. I was gonna say I might possibly go so far as to say it's my least favorite visually. That's not true, because there are versions that are kind of derived from it that definitely look worse. But I think the DOS version has a very kind of plain look to it that in some ways, maybe not a step down, but I think it's a lateral move from the Apple II version. And I think there's a lot of other graphical interpretations of those graphics that are more interesting to look at than the DOS version. And I think that's awesome. What are the issues with the PC Engine version? It looks fine. It looks... the graphics are not the problem, no. I mean, I wouldn't say... None of the ports that I dislike because of how they look. It's all about how they play. So the PC Engine version... Now, it's been a while since I played it, but... I think the combat's just like completely broken, and that's a common thread in some of these versions where like the blocking doesn't work properly and parrying doesn't work, and like movement, like the enemy AI, like we were stuck on the skeleton in level 3 for like fucking half an hour because you couldn't fight the skeleton properly, because when you block you get pushed back in a way you're not supposed to, or I forget the details, but it was like I was eventually able to devise a fairly watertight combat strategy that just worked, but it was really stupid. Well, the thing is, it's tough to replicate it if you don't know what you're doing, but it's not a technical limitation, right? Because every single platform that this game was ported to is basically orders of magnitude more powerful than the Apple II. And the Apple II version runs, yeah, it has a lot of slowdown, but it controls perfectly. So, like, there's definitely no excuse from a technical standpoint. But I think the bigger issue is that, like, a lot of people who ported this game just didn't understand the mechanics, because they clearly didn't replicate the mechanics. Like, some of the mechanics might work similarly enough in isolation, but some of them being a little bit off, like, compounds very quickly into something that just, like, does not handle like it's supposed to. But today, we're going to be playing the FM Towns version, and hopefully, if all goes well, we will also be playing through the Macintosh version. I have some obligations later tonight, which does put kind of a hard time limit on the stream. But I think we should have time to finish both versions. It should be relatively smooth, barring any big technical obstacles. And if we somehow end up not being able to finish the Mac version, we'll come back to that next time. The Mac version will be interesting because it's a version that some people are familiar with. People seem to be quite fond of it. I'm not so fond of it. I mean, it plays fine, but I think the graphics are kind of ugly because they're a bastardization of the god graphics from the PC98 version. And I feel like, for the most part, people who praise the Mac Prince of Persia are just completely unfamiliar with the Japanese versions. And I mean, I was kind of the same way for a long time. I thought it was pretty cool, and then I saw what the PC98 version looks like. I was like, ah, okay, I see. So that's what it's supposed to look like. The Mac version is like a very shoddy, clumsy kind of reappropriation of it. But luckily, today, you will all get that context because we're playing the FM Towns version, which has the PC98 graphics, and we're going to go directly into the Mac version. But before we do, we'll do one last little detour, and that's going to be for a little bit of box art review. And we're going to be looking at Breath of Fire, the Capcom RPG published in America by Squaresoft, because I don't know what the fuck Capcom was doing at the time, I guess. I mean, they were not known for good localizations at the time, that's for sure. I'm not that familiar with this series. I'm not a big RPG guy. I do remember this barely from the time as being something that was, like, mentioned and talked about. I guess this actually did come out in PAL, because most sort of higher profile Super Nintendo RPGs did not come out in PAL regions. And RPGs just, I don't know, wasn't a huge deal. I mean, I had friends who were kind of, like, aware of them and being sort of like, and I'm thinking of that, like, I guess, sort of America-centric idea of, like, the Super Nintendo is like the RPG console, and, like, being sort of into those games and thinking those are, like, the highlight or whatever. The first one did not come out here. Interesting. See, that's the thing, right? Because, yeah, maybe I knew someone who had the second one or was into it, but that's the thing, like, I wasn't, at the time, really cognizant of people, like, importing games and playing games from other regions or whatever. Obviously, you know, I was kind of on the internet, not really in a, you know, real sense in, like, 92, but by, you know, 94, 95, I was definitely on, you know, kind of message boards and things like that. So I would be, of course, exposed to things like that through there. But even sort of locally, there was, like, some awareness, I guess, of things like Final Fantasy and things like that. Now, you know, I'd played Phantasy Star. I'd played at least Shining in the Darkness. I don't know if I played Shining Force, but like I played more stuff on the Mega Drive than on the Super Nintendo. But I digress. I wasn't huge into RPG type stuff, and I still, because I never have been, this is not a series that I've ever really like gotten sort of into. The only thing I really know about this one in particular is I recall, you know, speaking of Capcom localization, that apparently this one also has like this I don't know if it's despite not being handled by Capcom, but apparently the localization of this one is pretty trash, but I guess it's maybe to be expected at the time. I don't know. I guess, you know, as far as the art goes, which is what we're really here for, I guess they were going for, like, it definitely has a, not an Image Comics vibe, but sort of a, I don't know, Valiant or some kind of Malibu, maybe some Image knockoff. Maybe it's the second one's localization that I'm thinking of. I guess it's possible. But yeah, obviously the art style here, like, has fuck all to do with the game. I don't know much about Breath of Fire, but I'm very familiar with Capcom and Capcom artwork. So I know some of the character designs, and I know, like, the aesthetic of these games. And I know that this is not it. But it's just like how things went back then, and I can get pretty tired of it. Now, I do think that if, like, even if the composition was the same, if the character designs and art style actually matched, like, if you gave this to one of the Capcom artists to, like, redraw, it could be pretty sick, you know? I don't think the pose of the main character or the sort of general idea is terrible, but there's a lot of details of the execution that kind of bother me. Not just stylistically, how it just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right at all for a JRPG or a Capcom game to look like this, in my mind. But there's a bunch of technical stuff that's kind of weird, like the foreshortening on the guy's arm is not, I don't know, it's a little strange. Like, his head and his far shoulder are, like, vastly different in scale, but then his entire back arm is kind of the same scale. Like, his forehead doesn't quite seem to line up with his hair. Like, his entire head seems to be, like, in a couple of different angles. You know, by the standards of Super Nintendo box art, it's not atrocious, but it's not, you know, by the standards of good art, it's not technically particularly well executed, in my opinion. But the most maybe egregious thing is, like, the gigantic black box around the fucking logo. It's like, oh, we were handed this asset, but we couldn't figure out how to isolate it. Or it's like, whoops, our artist painted an orange sunset, not realizing that the logo is orange. Well, I guess we'll just have a black box around it. Like, it's so extremely clumsy. And then, like, the black bar around the Squaresoft logo that's just, like, awkwardly placed, half overlapping the image. Like, they could have just put it at the bottom right of the image, right underneath his hand. But no, it has to, like, weirdly overlap part of the you know, the layout and part of the image. Like, this looks like a fucking bootleg. I'm not talking about the quality of the illustration, but the layout of the packaging, and, like, legitimately, like, if you look at these weird ass bootlegs, those are the kinds of things that's common to see. You see, like, a collage of, like, here's some artwork from fucking Lion King, and here's Streets of Rage, and here's whatever, and you have these, like, weird cutout things, and it's just like, it's bizarre. And for that to be, like, an actual real cover, you know, you have these guys on the left being, like, awkwardly kind of cut off. The Wolfman's, like, very, very, very barely fits into frame. I mean, granted, this scan, I guess, might have a few millimeters cut off, but even so, like, it's just, I don't like the illustration, but setting the illustration aside, it's like a bafflingly incompetently put together box, in my opinion. So I think there is, like, I can see why certainly someone who doesn't have familiarity with the Capcom art or whatever, you know, and certainly myself, if I had seen this on a shelf back then, like, I wouldn't have the kind of reaction I have now. I think in the grand pantheon of like shitty American Super Nintendo boxes, it fares better than many for sure. Like I said, I think conceptually, like, I don't know what's going on in the background. Like, there's a lot of it that's kind of boring and plain. It's not a, like, super compelling, like, composition in its entirety. But if we imagine that the logo had, like, actually not been in a black box, we imagine that it had fit a little better, if, you know, maybe change the color palette and whatever so the logo, you know, pops against the background, whatever, and it had been drawn a little better, it could have been great, you know. So there's something to it, but there's enough about it that's like not great that I'm like immediately annoyed. You know, there are games that have, like, Japanese games that have awesome artwork, that have an American box that is like totally reinterpreted, that is still like a quality, cool box art in its own right. And I think this is not, you know, this isn't Mega Man 1, but it's not, what's a good example? I don't know, Turtles in Time or something. Like, I think those American Konami covers are a bit weird, but they're at least well done for what they are. This is not nearly well done enough for what it is to justify replacing sick-ass Capcom artwork. I reckon you could take the original vertical Super Famicom box and crop it somehow, and it would still look way better than this. So for me, I'm gonna say this is a 2-star box. It's just too annoying to look at, even though it's got qualities that are sort of justifiable. There's just too few elements that I can look at and say, yeah, this is sick. Everything that I look at positively here is stuff that has like promise and potential, and not something that actually looks good. I think that's my take. So there you go. There's my review of the American Breath of Fire box. Hope you enjoy. With that, let me hydrate.
What have you got there? A box?
We're never free, are we? You know, if we don't get to the Mac version of Prince of Persia, that's your fault, McCall 45. Just want you to know that. But that's okay. Grab this cover. I guess we're hopping back here. For a slight bit of contrast, let's look at Ancient Magic. Bazoo Maho Sekai. From Lord Hawkby. I'm not familiar with this game. The artwork looks familiar. Or not the illustration, but the illustration style. I'm wondering if I'm familiar with other art from this person. It's a copyright to Yamada something or other down there. Akihiro Yamada. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Like, I recognize the name. I can't really immediately place it, but I'm sure I've seen a bunch of other stuff. Oh yeah, they did Akamajo Dracula Double X, right? Think so. And I'm sure a million other things. But yeah, this is pretty sick. It's got a lot going on. I think immediately, and I'm always instantly pleased when I see a Super Famicom box that actually fits the box. It doesn't have a bunch of weird, you know, borders and banners and frames and weird cut-off things. Like, it's actually properly formatted for it. Got a sick logo. Oh yeah, Gaiapolis for sure. Yeah, that's probably the other thing I would know them from. Terra Fantastica I can't place visually, but I recognize the name. I'm sure I've seen it. I love the composition of the shape of these sort of clouds framing this backdrop of this dark goat skull lord. These big ass skull banner pauldrons. These little towers. I mean, it's like, what's not to love? Like, it's so unbelievably sick. The one thing I guess I wish, like, I think the colors blend a little bit more than I would like. I think the werewolf character, or whatever they are, blends in a little bit with the backdrop. It'd be interesting to sort of isolate the layers just a little bit more color-wise. But these are like minor nitpicks, obviously. I guess the other two characters, I mean, they're wearing a uniform essentially. So it's fair that they're the same colors, but they also sort of blend together just a little bit. But it's so cool. Like the faces are so expressive, like the anatomy, just the energy and the motion and all the like the clothing and the sort of billowing smoke. Like, it's super well painted. I think this is absolutely astonishing. I mean, I didn't bring it up on the last box, but we have, you know, the classic sort of poster test. You know, would I want this on my wall as a poster? And this is like an easy yes. Like this, you know, holy shit, this looks so sick. Definitely passes the back of the box test, where you look at this and you go, holy shit, what is this? I gotta look at the back of the box to see what this game is. And I'm actually not familiar. I mean, I can't say I'm super duper well versed in Hot B, but I'm definitely curious to look into this. I would expect that it's not a game that actually interests me that much as far as what the game is. But I'm curious to look into it, because I think at the same time, like, if it's got a cover like this, there's got to be something to it. It's an RPG, okay. I figured it would either be an RPG or some kind of strategy thing, or like, I guess in general I was thinking something sort of PC centric, because there's stuff like shit, what is it called? Dragon's Earth, something like that. And things like what's it called? The PS1 game, or even Bahamut Senki, stuff that's like, you look at it and you look at screenshots and you think like, oh, it's an RPG, or like, oh, it's a strategy game, and then you try to play it and it's like, what the fuck even is this game? You know, there's a couple of games like that. Meru Piranha, or whatever it's called, that's what I was thinking on the PS1 game. That's like a sort of a board game kind of a thing. I don't know.
What have you got there? A box?
But yeah, I mean, this looks fucking ultimate, and I'm definitely curious to look into this. I'm gonna say, I think it's been a while, but I'm gonna say this is a 6-star game. It's an ultimate god box. I mean, I have absolutely no complaints. This is unbelievably cool. MP83 also wants to ruin the stream, I see. That's all right. It's all right. Let's do that. And take a look at Metal Stoker Neo Hardboiled Shooting for the PC Engine. I think this is really cool. I think it's a little bit of a shitty scan, I'm sure, because it's got a lot of kind of weird patterns. I imagine it would look better in person. I think it's probably, for me at least, I like it more in concept than execution. Some of that may be the fault of the scan. Just the kind of the contrast and the way certain things, the legibility of certain things. I do think it's really striking, like the use of white, like this super high contrast. I think that's really cool. But this like vehicle thing, I guess, in the foreground sort of blends together a little bit. Like it's a little hard to make out. Like, I guess it's a little visually busy with the high contrast logo and the text and everything. But of course, you know, I don't think that's a complete accident either. And it feels appropriate. It doesn't, like, that in itself doesn't clash with the aesthetic vibes of the cover. So I don't mind it really. I think, as with anything else, of course, you know, I'm just judging it based on my subjective tastes. I can't say it's an objective, you know, scientific scale. I mean, it's you know, it's a little scientific, but But there's always an element of personal preference and taste, and what sort of speaks to you, or what speaks to me in this case. And I think there's something about it that's really cool. Like, I love that it's so sort of striking. It reminds me a little bit of like Crying on the Mega Drive, or even the PAL version of Megalomania, which I guess because it has like a big face on it. And I don't always love those covers, but I respect that they're going for something interesting. And I think as far as like the mechanical drawing and everything, like that's definitely well done. So I think it's cool. And yeah, like I can't speak for how well it represents the game, whether in a literal or sort of atmospheric sense. But I think it's cool. Like for me, I think this doesn't quite resonate with me like some covers do. Like even the one we just looked at, subject matter wise or character design wise isn't necessarily my thing. In some ways this is more my thing, but just the way it's painted and the composition and the vibe of the illustration is something that resonates with me more than this does. But I do think this is cool. I do like it for sure. I guess it's like it raises a little bit of questions. I mean, I think I would like it better without with just the illustration, without the title, without the company logos and everything. Even though I think the design of those elements are still pretty, like they take the illustration into account in a good way that I like. So for me personally, it's not like a top rating cover, but it's an above average one for sure. So I'm gonna say 4 stars. It's pretty slick. It's pretty sweet. All right, that's it. If anyone requests more reviews, I'm gonna refund you because I want to play some fucking Prince of Persia. All right. Where are we? There we are. Let me just hydrate. Thank you for requesting. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Now, if I recall correctly, if I have the stream stuff all set up, do this. I think this is all basically set up to just basically hit the ground running, and we'll be right into the game as I boot up this emulator. Now, I cannot recall. I might as well. It doesn't really matter. I was going to say I can't recall if we used the timer or not, but I think we can bring up the timer. Because it can be a little interesting to see. We did for sure see that even though Prince of Persia runs on a 1 hour clock, not all hours are created equal. And some games run kind of faster or slower. And of course, there's like cutscenes and things like that that sort of eat into the time. So it is kind of interesting to see. We will get, like, if we finish the game, we'll see how much time we had left, or if we don't, we'll see how long it took to game over. So I think it's kind of interesting to have this sort of real-time clock next to it. I don't remember if we did that for the previous games or not, but we'll do it now. Why not? So this version, put out by Riverhill Soft. I'm going to bring up the volume mixer here. I'm going to turn down the game audio just a smidge. These graphics are directly from the Arsys software developed PC98 version. And the music is the same as the PC Engine version. You can see down here the credits for T's Music, who did the CD arrangement of the PC98 soundtrack for the PC Engine version. So the compositions are all the same in all these Japanese computer versions, but this is the only one we've played that's on CD. So we don't get the voiceover like in the Mega CD version, but we get the PC Engine CD arrangement. These new graphics for the intro are so cool. The character designs I do quite like in these versions. So Arsys invented like well, they didn't invent the turban, but they they created the design of the main character with the vest and the turban, which was retained in a lot of other versions. I don't have any recollection specifically of the timer accuracy. I think what I did discover was that in the Japanese versions that let you change game speed, is that the game speed does not affect the clock. So setting the game speed higher actually lets you like literally move faster and beat the game more quickly. But of course, to a degree, it can make it more difficult as well. So good. This like redesigned throne room is like pretty much everything that Arceus did to embellish the graphics, I think, is like a step up, which is why I think the DOS version is fine. I have no complaints with it per se, but some of what you see in these other versions, including the Japanese ones, as well as the Atari ST version, they really highlight how mundane and plain the DOS version is, and how sort of conservative they were. I think it's not a bad idea to retain some of the flatness of the visuals. There's a degree of stylization in the character designs in the Apple II game where they're like mostly sort of in silhouette that the DOS version, it kind of tries at least to have its cake and eat it too by adding more color but still retaining kind of the silhouetted look. And you can certainly fill in blanks kind of to make things look a little goofier, which I think is what we'll see in the Mac version that does that, you know, to these graphics. But I also think that this, as well as the Atari ST version, the Mega Drive version, like honestly, most versions show that like if you actually draw more detailed graphics on top of those Apple II sprites, like you can actually make it look pretty sick. Rune and G, greetings, greetings. The main character is in fact not a prince, and officially the main character is named, if we can use that word, the Kid. But it's, you know, kind of shorthand. A lot of people, myself included, if I'm thoughtless and careless, we'll just call him the Prince. But no, he is in fact not a prince. He's some guy. The Prince is his boyfriend. So the PC-98 and the other versions derived from it graphically, they run in 640 by 400, so it's a relatively high resolution mode with 16 colors. So as is typical, everything, like there's a lot of dithering everywhere. And as far as how exactly that would look on a monitor or a TV or on your stream, on your fucking telephone, whatever, like it's gonna be a little, I don't think there's a canonical exact this is how it will look and how it should look. I think even with a crystal clear RGB connection, there's a degree of softening of just the phosphor image, whatever, on a CRT compared to a modern CRT. But I think even looking at it like this, I guess I'm kind of used to these types of visuals, so it doesn't bother me. I can see why the color, I mean, I can even see why someone would say that the Mac version is a little easier on the eyes than this. I disagree, but I can see where one would be coming from. I love the way this looks. Guy of Persia didn't have the same ring to it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the graphics. Let's see. The menus, like everything, I would say the audio is basically the only thing that distinguishes this from the PC98 version, in my limited experience. And that's probably a good thing. Like, the X68000 version is actually kind of weird, because the X68000 should be far more capable than the PC98 in terms of graphics. But what they did is they reused the main in-game graphics, but for the cutscenes, they did some weird, like, repainting and, like, blurring and smearing to add some colors, mostly not to very good effect. It also doesn't have the same, like, speed options, and it runs much slower, which seems bizarre. So the X68000 version in isolation is not bad. I mean, it's kind of like the Atari ST, or the Amiga version is a better example. Like, the Amiga version is fine. It plays well, but there's no real reason to play it on the Amiga if you can play the DOS version. And I think it's the same thing with the X68000. There's no reason to play that version if you can play it on a PC98 or an FM Towns. And I mean, if you're just emulating anyway, then yeah, there's no reason to pick that one. So even though there's no, you know, definitive ultimate version of the game, there are definitely some versions that are kind of, some versions that are made obsolete by other ones. Yeah, as far as FM Towns as a platform, what it's capable of and what you would expect, I have really no frame of reference. This is literally the only thing I've ever played on FM Towns, so I can't speak to that. But from the perspective of a Prince of Persia port explorer, this is definitely a version I can recommend. We registered our name. We can... okay, I guess... Oh yeah, I did finish level 1 earlier today when I was just testing things, so I guess we have the replay here. Okay. I didn't mean to. Can we just... There we go. Okay. I wasn't sure if I could back out of the menu. We can create a user disk. I don't really know how a lot of that stuff works, but I think we should be fine. I guess we saved something anyway. But yeah, let's start the game. Oh yeah, so we should do this first. So we have yeah, that's the best times. We can change our name. We can change movement speed and combat speed. So there's 9 speed settings. This is the same as the PC98 version, where 1 is fastest and 9 is slowest. So movement speed 3, pretty snappy, that's the default. But combat, for whatever reason, is defaulting to 6, which you might have even seen that in the attract mode, actually. It goes quite slow. 3 is actually pretty fast, but we can lower it to 4. Stream is stuck at 1080, 60. Well, I'm not partnered, so I don't know how that works nowadays, but I guess it's more common to have quality options, but I don't think it's still a guarantee unless you're a partner. And transcode locally. Well, I'm definitely not doing that. Well, I'm definitely not changing anything in my stream since the last time I streamed, so if anything is weird or different, it's not, to my knowledge anyway, anything on my end. Or if you mean as a viewer, I don't know. I just stream here, alright? What's up, Zetsubera? Back to the Prince, indeed. But this one... Gamen Kirikai, this is like... Oh, I think this is if the screen blacks out in between transitions. So it's defaulting to on. Let's keep it like that and see if that's what it does. Yeah, you see it blinks like that? Let's try changing that and see if that's what it is. Yeah, okay, I think I prefer it without it. So interestingly, the X68000 version had different sound effects, as I recall. But I think these are... Because I want to say that there was, like, samples... Like, it sounded a little fancier. And these sound effects don't sound particularly fancy. They're fine, but they're not... You know, they're not... like PCM samples or whatever. So we got the sword. Yeah, it's funny. I just, like, I don't know much about that sort of stuff. It's not something I've, like, thought about recently. I'm sure most of the channels I watch are partnered. So I can't even recall the last time I watched a stream and I wanted to change quality and the option wasn't there. I've also not really had people complain that, like, oh, your bitrate is too high, I can't lower the quality. I guess it's, like, generally speaking, less of a concern now than it was, like, 10 years ago. There we go. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that riposting is in the game. So you can see there, like, technically the combat speed is one step slower than platforming speed, but it feels about right. Yeah, Fluffy Quack, I noticed that as well. Honestly, I cannot recall if that's like that in the PC98 version. It would be a peculiar thing to add here, but I actually don't recall. Luckily, my playthroughs of those other versions are on YouTube, so you can look it up and confirm yourself. Oh, that's kind of an interesting effect. I don't remember if it looks like that in PC98. Yeah, I'm fucking up here. Realizing that it's been a while since I played this, it'll take a little bit to refresh my memory on level layouts. I want to say that there's a health extension on this stage, but I always forget where it is. Not missing it, but, like, I think it's coming up and it's like, oh, right, it's not here, it's whatever next screen. It's interesting, obviously the CD music is the same as, that's exactly where I don't want to stand, right? The instant screen transitions are so good. Yeah, I always think I'm gonna go up here, but it's not. It's after this fight. Because the CD music is the same as the PC Engine one, like, that's all familiar territory. But I guess the instrumentation of the, like, the FM music... Alright, cool. I took damage here and I can go up here and heal. Perfect. But yeah, like, the chip music doesn't... It sounds... I don't know, a little unfamiliar. But I guess, you know, that could just come down to... It might sound exactly the same. I guess the PC98 version, you would have had different hardware configurations and stuff too. So depending on how my emulator was set up, it's entirely possible that the instrumentation sounded a little different. The CD music is, like, literally the exact same from the PC Engine version, but the non-CD music definitely sounds vaguely unfamiliar. Like, in the very specifics of, like, the instrumentation and what have you. I like it. Good port. I was still on the very edge, so I could make that jump without realigning. What's up, Mr. Radon? Yeah, this is an awesome port. It's basically the same as the PC98 one. Therefore, it is awesome. I look forward to not being stuck here for half an hour, like in the PC Engine version. The one thing that's kind of missing here, missing isn't a fair way to put it, but the DOS version in later revisions introduced like alternate color palettes. So some of the dungeon levels have different color tiles, whereas this, like most versions, keep the exact same colors. So there's a health extension over to the right, but I usually don't bother with it because it's kind of difficult to get. That's right. You need 3 tiles to do that. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's do that again. We didn't lose that much time there, so that's fine. It's feeling a little cheeky thinking that I could make that jump. But that was incorrect. Here it should be fine. I mean, not that you need to do a running jump there anyway. And just barely squeeze through. Oh, that's so satisfying. So we should have a checkpoint here before Skellington. Okay, the jaw traps sound pretty pathetic. But yeah, the variety of tile sets and stuff is something that I think is nice in some other versions. Like the Super Famicom version adds more tile variety. Like different skeleton combat music? That's pretty fucking sick. I don't recall that being a thing in other versions. Yeah, I think the you should check out the Atari ST version if you haven't, Radon. That has like super cool fancy graphics with like this like rim lighting effect on all the characters. Can I fucking get a parry? Should be it. Oh, I love the preemptive sword holstering. I'm very curious to see what the music situation is going to be like if there's different combat music tracks. But I would assume that if that's a different track, that would be kind of a boss theme, and we'll get that for the Minister on stage 6. Well, we'll find out pretty soon. But yeah, I love the embellished graphics in this as well. So now we're in the Palace tile set. It's still pretty grayish, but I mean, the thing is too, like, it's 16 colors, and you wouldn't really know it, honestly. That's right. So that works, but I think you do want to drop... Yeah, you can hear a door opening. You do want to drop that tile. Oh, I fucked that up. That's okay. The beginning of this stage is kind of strange. You don't really want to try to deal with that guard from there. The door should be open now. Yeah. We can just pass by. We can go down here. Just ignore him. Definitely a little rusty. It's been a while. The other cool thing, I mean, there's a lot of cool things, but one of the coolest things that really caught me off guard about the Atari ST version is the sound effects in combat. The characters like grunt when they get hit. And it's like, I've never missed that playing any other version. But you play a version that has that, it's like, holy shit, like the combat feels so alive. We talked briefly during previous streams at some point or another about like what would my idealized sort of ultimate version of this game look like. And I think for sure one thing I would like, let's say for the sake of argument that I was making my own version of this game, or at least like the graphics, what would I do? And one thing I would want to do for sure is making each stage visually distinct. There we go. Maybe not, you know, well, probably not a unique tile set for each level, but so the original game, you know, it has two tile sets. It has the dungeon tile set and the palace tile set. In some versions, it's interesting in this one because the colors are not that different between the two. It's not like that jarring a shift. But in the DOS version, you know, the dungeons, if you're playing an older version or like the Amiga version, the dungeons are all gray, like a kind of a cool gray, and the palace is warm yellow. Again, it's not the same in all versions. So this is like the pointless thing where he just steals your potion, right? Yeah, let's not bother. And then in stage 7, you get dropped back into the dungeons, and then you make it back to the palace, and then for some reason, stage 12 is a dungeon again. What I would want to do is, like, create more distinctive visuals, so partially so that each level, like, you can look at a screenshot and instantly tell what level it is. But also to kind of help with the narrative of creating a more sort of seamless transition between different areas and have them sort of, the transitions between them make sense, so it doesn't feel like you're going from tile set A to tile set B, but more of a sort of a gradual change and evolution. And I remember we talked about this before as well, that the I would make the stage 12 be like outdoors. So you're like, because it's like a vertical climb, like have it so that you're on these like scaffolds or whatever, you're climbing this like outside of this tower to reach Jafar's stronghold or whatever. Like that'd be so sick. And this like stormy night outside and whatever. That's right, that's a little trolly there. Okay, let's see if we get unique music here. No? Oh, that's right. This guy knows how to fight. Do I? Is the question. Okay. Got a little lucky there. There's like a pretty generous input buffer that sort of screws me up a little bit. Oh shit! Dude, that's sick. The little musical interlude there. You don't need to do this, but it's fun, so why not? I don't have enough for a running start. Whoa! Well, I fucked it up. Oh shit, we do get different colors here. I mean, that's probably like this in the PC98 version as well. I just don't remember, but that's good. But yeah, so if you grab the ledge there, he like takes a step forward, and steps on the switch to close the gate, and you fall down. Maybe my favorite level? I don't know. Oops. Yeah, so as far as the timer goes, like, it definitely doesn't count during cutscenes. I'm not sure if it counts, like, when you're waiting to respawn after death, when you're, like, walking through the stairs and whatever. But I also don't know, like, it seemed, I remember when we played the Apple II version. That's right, that just doesn't work. I usually just run through and... Oh, there we go. I always get confused when I have to realign myself there because I usually get it first try. Like the Apple II... Oh, okay. We take those, I guess. The Apple II version runs at a super inconsistent speed, so it makes sense. That was a little surprising, but... I should have been dead anyway. All right, okay, let's do that again. Like, it makes sense that the clock is also not really capable of keeping up in real time in the Apple version. And because we don't really see the clock on screen like in real time, it's hard to know for sure how it operates. But it also ultimately doesn't really matter. Mistimed it. Combat actually working correctly is highly satisfying. Let's be a little careful here. I think... I'm trying to remember. I think we might fight one more guy before the health potion. Crouch hopping is a little weird in this one. See, that's what I was trying to do. Let's be extra careful here. Not tempt fate. So here you gotta do a running jump. All right, so we missed that. What? Let me. Okay. We have time, so. How could I not get that? It's weird. So you only get one shot at that. Technically, you can, I guess, get the potion from the exit, but I'm not really confident in my ability to do that, so I'd rather take the death there and redo the level than preemptive holstering, so good. Then make it all the way to the exit and then restart the level anyway. Crouching to dodge those does not seem to work very reliably. At least not the way I'm used to doing it. But it could just be rust. I'm sure it's not consistent between all versions, but it's usually quite generous. Okay, I got confused there because I wasn't expecting to run through the gate. It's weird that it's so... Yeah, like the way you get pushed away from the gate when you turn around. Maybe it's different when the gate is in the process of being, like, closing versus being fully closed. I realized when I was stopping before that I was like just positioned like ambiguously enough that I wasn't sure if I would have room to do a running jump. So walk up to the very edge, turn around, and do running jump as soon as possible. Yeah, there we go. Easy. We'll just chalk it up to rust. So the exit is over here. Press the switch to open it, and the switch on the bottom left opens this gate. So if you open this gate, you can make it to the potion, and I guess technically you have time to jump back before it closes, but it's pretty tight. And I reckon it's more, the idea is more that you're supposed to discover that this area exists. And then realize, like, you're standing here, you can go, well, where the heck does this connect to? Well, I already fucked up getting to the exit. I might as well see where this leads. And you go, oh shit, it's this screen. That's how I find my way here. Level design in this game is brilliant. This fight is always... Let me really try this. Can I... I think as soon as I step on the switch, it will hear me. I don't think I can climb. Yeah. Alright, we'll do that. Problem solved. In several versions of the game, if he pushes you off that ledge and you end up down there, you're fucked. Because he will stay up there and you can't climb up. He'll hit you as you climb up and you get killed. But in proper good versions of the game, he will actually follow you down. I assume that's the case in this version, but I don't remember offhand. Well, this version I've never actually played, but I don't remember offhand if it's like that in the PC98 version. I assume it is, but because I don't know, I'm glad we don't have to find out. Typically, I just get more nervous trying to deal with these things, moving through them slowly. There we go, there's a switch in the center that closes the other gate. Is there one more fight? I always forget. No, there we go. How does this look? Alright. So again, this opens up that gate, but... So in the Apple II version, the colors are like inverted. I appreciate any version that at least creates a stark visual effect for the gravity potion. But of course, how it can deal with like palettes and stuff will differ from version to version. But in some versions, there's no effect at all. Some versions have like music that plays. That's pretty alright, I think. I pressed the wrong button. Okay. Alright, so this is the hardest stage in the game. See, even playing at speed 4 compared to movement speed of 3, combat speed of 4, I mean. It's like fast enough that I get tripped up pretty frequently. Right, time that correctly. It's very funny to me that stage 3 has a checkpoint and this stage doesn't, when it's like the longest and most... Like, it's a long stage and it has... Oh, that guy doesn't matter. Like, dangerous stuff right up through the very end. Right. Or not to fight behind this thing. Although I guess I can see his body well enough. Right, easy. I guess I'll take that. I don't really need it, and there's another potion. But, I think Dark Castle should have taught me some lessons about hubris and humility. Sneaky step here so that guy doesn't turn around. Makes this next screen a little easier. So I think Jordan Mechner has played and completed all versions of this. I'm fairly confident that he has not. I think he's talked on occasion about different versions and stuff, but I'm sure there's a lot that he aren't even that familiar with, which he shouldn't. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say he shouldn't be, but do you get kind of a drop on that guy by doing that? But he shouldn't need to bother with like the Game Boy version and shit. Like they're trash anyway, some of those versions. All right, so this should just be a matter of running full speed. And I fucked it up. I forgot how many screens I should be running. I didn't drop that tile. I think we should actually be fine. But at least the traps are timed correctly. Ah, we're not fine, because that's why you don't want this guy to drop on the switch. When you don't know the timing for that, you're grateful for the guy dying on the switch, because it leaves that first door open. But if you get far enough to close that door, like I just did, then you can't reopen that first door. See, the hubris got to me. I was being overly confident. I'm sure he's played some versions here and there. I know he's a big fan of Katsuya Terada's Super Famicom artwork, as anyone with good taste is. But he has not done an extensive YouTube or blog series about playing 24 versions of this game. That I'm aware of, anyway. I always like stop on every screen because I forget what's on. I just know that there's spikes. I just know that if you get too complacent running through these screens, you get fucked up. But again, speaking to the awesome level design, like this whole level, you see what's coming up above you. Like you can study these screens, you can map it out, you can memorize it, you can see exactly what you need to do. Like this game essentially let's usually always bother, but might as well. Doesn't waste much time. Like if you're talking about completing this game deathless blind, there's only one blind jump required in the entire game. And it's in level 11. It's actually right before the entrance, like, to level 12, really. And even then, like, the actual solution to that jump is what you probably would assume that you would have to do, which is a running jump. Dude, he's fucking me up. I didn't want him to die on there, but let's just do it correctly the first time and we'll be fine. Well, let's stop here. Okay, so that's the thing, like... Platform above me. So I'm like getting shoved up from against. I never go to this screen. See, the thing is, I need these 3 tiles to do a running jump, but when I turn around, I get like pushed enough, far away enough from that gate that it's making me think that I'm 2.5 tiles away from the edge. And this is what was fucking me up when I was like in between those 2 gates when I was trying to jump over the switch and the spikes. I think there's a way to align myself such that I'm actually at... that I can turn around Because when I like bump into the gate, I'm a little further back. Okay, call it science. Okay, it worked. Okay. That was still weird and scary. Good thing I found that extra potion, because there's still some fighting to be done. Oh, I thought he died on the switch. Don't remember what's across here, but be fine. Don't need a running jump here, so that's fine. We're not quite done. Just oh, shit. That freaked me out so bad because I was like I switched where I was looking on the screen just as the screen transitioned in a way I wasn't expecting. It just like caught me off guard. The fact that this trap is like right on the edge of the screen is fucked up too, because it actually makes this really creepy. You can end up in a position where you step like into that trap when you don't expect to. Like the sneaky step is supposed to keep you safe in terms of like you have to do it twice to overshoot the boundary into a tile that's dangerous. But it doesn't always work that super reliably, and it also can depend on whether you are like where exactly on the tile you are, like if you're sort of crossing that boundary or not. It's a little hard to explain, but see, we're still not done. I almost made a fatal mistake. But it does like minute little differences that can be the difference between life and death if the game doesn't behave the way you expect it to. Alright. We're kind of past the worst, but also the last kind of home stretch is the stuff I remember the least. This is the upside down level. Well, it's not the upside down level per se, but it's the level with the upside down potion. The upside down potions, plural I should say, because you can find a second one to reverse the effect. I guess I wasn't really thinking, by the way, when people were commenting on the combat music, it didn't really register to me what the combat music actually sounds like. But I guess listening to it now, I can kind of see why some might think it feels a little out of place or a little different. So strange that the skeleton... I mean, the skeleton is a unique enemy. There's only one skeleton in the game. But giving the skeleton its own, like, boss theme isn't crazy. But for that to be the one boss fight to have its own music is a little peculiar. Always get fucked up by this. Because there's a switch. I guess it's the tile right before the door. Yeah, fucked it up. Whenever there's like jumps right around the edge of a screen like that, it's... Oh, I mistimed that. A little awkward. And timing on that can change a little bit too between versions, like whether the screen switching is instant or not and things like that. I mean, it's not the game's fault. I fucked up, but... There we go. Whoops, I was looking at chat. Jesus Christ. Well, let's do that again, shall we? Can't do that running full speed. Yeah, like, I think there's, there's no arguments against giving the skeleton its own music theme. It's just surprising that the skeleton has a distinct music theme, but then, like, the boss on level 6 doesn't. And I don't remember. We'll see if the Royal Guard does. I mean, that's what I call him anyway. Chief, Constable, whatever. The guy on level 12 who isn't Jafar in this version. Which is an awesome change to the game, by the way. If you're familiar with how the original game wraps up, we're in for a little bit of a treat at the end of this game. But I always get a little, like that screen we just did, that's one of those screens I just don't have a great solution for. Like, I don't remember exactly how I would typically traverse it. I would, like, kind of do it a little different every time. Just improvise it. So we need to open that gate with that loose tile, because the switch to open the exit is on the top left of that screen. So if you don't make this little detour, you can't finish the level. And I do think, as far as the original game goes, the showdown with Jafar is easily one of the game's, like, weak links. Primarily, in my opinion, because the narrative through line of the game is otherwise so strong that it suddenly becoming a little flimsy there feels weird. What's up, Brightwood? I want to say that there's a health extension here somewhere. Wait, okay, I need to think. So that's an upside down ocean, but the next screen has the extension and the other. Or is this? They're not like different labels or colors, right? They're both yellow. Fuck, I forget. Well, okay. Fuck it, I guess we're doing it. Of course. Well, I gotta show this off. So you can continue the rest of the level like this. But you can also take this little extra detour. This is always like, I remember this being like, it isn't a big deal, you just waste a little time. But in my mind, I'm always like terrified that there's gonna be traps and shit. But it's super easy. Just, I don't know how I took damage from that. That was very strange, but that's fine. The time, yeah. 20 minutes left. It's actually not a lot, but it should be plenty. Hasn't been like a mega smooth playthrough. Want to say you go down here? Yeah. Gotta fight one more guy and then the exit. Tripped like a step more than I expected. So technically, if you increase the combat speed, that'll let you finish the game more quickly. But obviously, it's not really a worthwhile trade-off if it gets you killed. Yeah, I've definitely come across, like, weird falls like that. It happens, but it catches you off guard when it does, because it's clearly not supposed to. The mysteries of 100%ing Dark Castle will remain a mystery for some time, I believe. I haven't played it since I cleared beginner on stream. Well, that's mostly because I haven't really been in a game-playing mood over the past week or so. Right. Those screens fuck you up if you follow your instincts and stop at right after a screen transition. Because there's a falling pile at the very beginning of each screen. So this screen also always gets me confused. Because I keep thinking I don't have to go through here because I'm supposed to go up. But then that's not the case because I'm getting this confused with like the next level or something, and then I have to go through these jumps anyway. I'm pretty sure we just go up here. No, we don't. Of course. Every fucking time I get confused. Wasn't sure which tile. Time. Jump as soon as you can. This is where you go up. And it's actually, yeah, weirdly obvious in this version. Because we can see the tiles above us. So then we jump over here, and then we just run across. Deep satisfaction of no slowdown on this screen. Deep unsatisfaction of this guy somehow not being worse for wear after a bunch of stone tiles fell on his head. Right. So, whoa! Alright, here you gotta actually fuck up here and not get through like this. What the fuck? Why does crouching not work in this game? I forget, honestly, if you can fix that. Because usually, like, it's one of those things where technically there's like kind of a trap or a danger, but I kind of forgot that there is one because it's not a problem if you just navigate it smoothly, correctly. And then because I didn't, it turned into a problem. Yeah, but you can't scoot in this version. No. So you're supposed to do a running jump like as early as you can. We're cutting it a bit close on time. But the game has a bit of a lenient input buffer. So if you, of course, if you press right or left, you run. If you press up, you jump. If you press up and right or left, you do a standing forward jump. If you tap or hold up while running, you do a running jump. But if you start holding right, and you then wait a split second and start holding up, you do a running jump as soon as you can. But if you're a little too overeager and you start holding up too quickly, even though there's a tangible delay between the inputs, because of the way the game, like the game operates on a pretty low frame rate. I think we can just ignore this guy. So I'm trying to pick this up. You can press buttons like with a pretty tangible delay between them compared to most other games, and still have them register on the same frame, or at least within the window that the game considers it a simultaneous input, resulting in a forward jump. Yeah, it's a little weird that you can see the switches like that. And we gotta just not fuck this up. And, you know, distinguishing your inputs, keeping them clean, not doing a forward jump when you mean to do a running jump. It's not exactly difficult, but you can fuck it up if you're not careful. I pressed up. Literally the worst place to die, so that's like 2 minutes wasted. Combat isn't usually where I would take deaths, but, you know, it happens. First, I'll blame Rust. Okay, let's not run into the spikes. And shave off a few seconds not bothering with this tile impervious guy over here. Whenever you keep dying in the same spot too, it starts making me more impatient and more mistake prone. So it's easy to get in a bad sort of spiral. Go easy. What's up, Conga Line Monkey? This is an excellent port. This is essentially a port of the PC 98 version, which is of course excellent in its own right. Just fuck that up. With the only real noticeable difference, or meaningful difference, I guess, that I can tell, having not played the PC 98 version in a few months, but is the CD music from the PC Engine version. Of course, we do it without taking damage this time. Alright, level 11. There's a health extension there that I don't feel super comfortable bothering with when I'm this short on time. Will that come back to bite us? We'll find out, I guess. The timing of doing the parry and counter feels a little strange in this. Well, it's not the fault of the port. It's more like I'm not really used to it. A bunch of switches there that we want those tiles to take care of. Do this and keep running on this screen. The other door will close eventually if we don't. Drop. Button. Got him. So this is the one blind jump I was talking about. You can see the spikes, like you know, the natural thing to attempt here is a running jump. And that's, in fact, how you get through there. You can do that without taking damage. It's kind of weird and funky. I don't remember how to do it, but we got through there. Free health, hopefully enough to deal with this fella. Yeah, even at speed 4, the timing is like pretty tight. Alright, got it. Okay. We would certainly have had time to grab that extra health, but... there's like 2 or 3 fights left. So I think we'll be okay. I didn't want to take for granted that I would finish this level that smoothly, so... Level 12. Maybe another candidate for favorite level. Oh, unique. Oh, I mean, I guess I was going to say it's unique music is what I was reacting to. And I was going to say, oh, I guess the other versions would have had that. Like, well, yeah, the music is from another version of the game, so it would have had this track on this level too. What's up, K Price? But this was like... That jump was super fucked up in some version that we played, because you couldn't do that running start without hitting the spikes. Let's time that. But this level is pretty much all, like, perilous running jumps while doing a big vertical climb. Just supremely satisfying. It's not that difficult of a level once you sort of know the solution, but it's very tense to sort of get there. And I mean, of course, especially by the time you get to this part of the game, you would not have that much time left. So, like, learning this level is gonna be pretty stressful. You're not gonna be... Like, if this was level 1, you had 60 minutes, you could fuck around. It'd be, like, a piece of cake. But when you get here, you have, like, 12 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever. You feel like everyone's... I mean, especially not doing a playthrough like I'm doing now, but just, like, learning the game. You wouldn't have played for 55 minutes. You might have played for many attempts over many hours, so you get here and learning it is a bit here. Now, of course, this game does let you save. Even the DOS version lets you save. So you can, like, save scum and practice. Come across here? Yeah. But I feel like the game is designed, really, to be played without using saves. You need to do a running jump there, because if you do a standing jump and land, the recovery while you're landing makes you fall through. Alright, time for the final showdown. You may notice the sword missing there. Know what's going on with audio levels, but thank you, Quan Chi. Thank you, Macaw45. 74 months. Okay, I think there was a unique music track there, but I didn't want to die in combat, so I didn't have time to listen to it. So this is an awesome, like, climax. And then this stage transition from level 12 to level 12, which is the same in the DOS version too, mind you. But that's essentially a checkpoint. Not sure how time is handled here. We might find out. I kind of hope we don't, but... Looks so sick. Royal Guard. And this little musical interlude before the fight is so awesome. But he doesn't get a music theme. Yeah, I haven't gotten the hang of the rallying in this version at all. Yeah. So in the DOS version, that's Jafar, and he's just chilling in this dungeon. These tiles are all like RNG, by the way. I know in the Super Famicom version, which was also developed by Arsys Software, who made the PC98 version, which is the version that introduced all these changes. It is my memory, anyway, I could be mistaken, but it is my memory that in that version, when you exit through this door after this fight, the timer stops. I don't know if that's the case here. I kind of hope it is, but because logically it's a little weird for Jafar to like threaten the princess or take her away or whatever while he's in the midst of fighting you. That pit can and has gotten me killed multiple times. But this part, it's so unbelievably mega sick. Even though it's a little clumsy in some versions in terms of visual transitions. 4 minutes left. Oh, the Jafar portrait's so good. There he is. How fucking sick is this? Like, this is 50 times cooler than him just showing up in the dungeon and you have this, like, whatever fight that's the same as every other fight. Of course, the Super Famicom version of this goes, like, fully mega for the second phase where he's got magic powers. But this is pretty ultimate. Oh! That was pretty close. Alright, just over an hour. So that includes some pause time at the beginning. That was close. Oh, the ending is so good. I do like the text in the original ending. And to a degree, I kind of miss having it here, like the narration. But the visuals of this is so sick. I'm curious what the staff roll is going to look like. Thanks for all the GGs. Appreciate that. Fucking just barely, dude. This art's like a little mouse. This character design is awesome. And this looks so much shitter in the X68000 version where they like redrew these images very crudely. So sick. Trying to remember which version, but these little like cinematic snippets, it's so sick. But yeah, it's interesting, like the music, it like doesn't quite, like the way it's repurposing the PC Engine music doesn't quite fit like the transition from the ending to the staff roll was like kind of this weird jarring cut because it's not like that in the PC Engine version that the music was made for. And because that version didn't have this staff roll, there's no music for it. I mean, there's music, but there's no like CD music for it. I don't recognize this song either, but yeah, special thanks to Tease Music. to see the music. Yeah, I love this screen. And I remember in the PC Engine version, because this graphic is there, like it's just a staff roll that I think is not included, but the other ending visuals are in that version. Like, you can clearly tell that the statue is meant to be of the kid, the prince, the main character. Because you can kind of make out the vest and the turban and everything. But in the PC Engine version, it's the little pixely blob, and you can't quite make out that that's the idea. The end. Man, this is such an absolute fucking god game. It's a very good version of it. But it's interesting. I was expecting this to be like essentially as close as we would get to a definitive version, in the sense that well, the CD music's great, so yeah, you should just play this over the PC98 version. But honestly, the way it sort of cuts between the different types of music and stuff, I don't think this is a worse experience than the PC98 version, but I really don't think it's better either. And obviously that's like the original that this is derived from. The music is cool, it's like a nice novelty, but ultimately I think both versions complement each other well. Whereas the X68000 version, it has the sound effects, which are better. Which I guess means that that's, you know, might not be a big thing, but it's something. Even if the intro graphics and stuff look worse. As far as emulating goes, I guess, for whatever reason, the intro in the PC98 version, like, crashes after this. Like, I had it happen, and I remember hearing that I wasn't the only one. So I guess this version at least lets you see the full intro. But yeah, you can't really go wrong with this version for sure. On that note, we're on a little bit of a schedule here, so we'll do this. We'll just let this simmer in the background. And do this. The FM Towns version. Ba-boom! We did it. Very, very, very barely, but we did it. We didn't get the sub 1 hour in this game with a 1 hour time limit, but that's more with my timing method than anything. So what's the review for this game? Well, I guess it's I guess we can go with the same lovey-dovey face as for the Mega CD version. It's the Mega CD version's cutscenes, like the showdown with Jafar and the ending is like mega super ultra sick in that version. But I do think the graphics look not as nice, so I guess it evens up. And even though this is roughly equal with the PC98 version, I think it's fair to give PC98 the edge in the mind-blowing department, because it is the original. It came first, and it's like, again, this isn't exactly worse. And I mean, I'll leave it up to you to determine the exact gradual difference between lovey-dovey face and mind exploding. I guess in my mind exploding is a potential higher grade. But at the end of the day, I think Prince of Persia ports can be classified pretty easily in like good ports, trash fire ports that you should never waste your time with, and there's like a small narrow category for like not as good but still maybe kind of interesting ports, or like ports that have some redeeming quality. And sometimes the edges between those categories can be a little blurry, but this one obviously very firmly in the good category. I'm gonna need to take a short break, but I'll keep it brief, and we should have time to run through the Mac version before I need to wrap things up for today. I'll talk more about that when I return, so let's shut this down and bring this back up, and I'll be right back. See you guys in just a few minutes. All right. I return. Now, let me consult my notes and do a little preparation to get the Macintosh version ready. Let me consult my notes. Bear with me for a moment. Right, I have a little reference sheet for the copy protection that we will have to deal with. I also need to check my notes for how to load the game. Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Before we do that, we can also update this. Let's see here. So this is the weird Aquayo designed box that was used for the re-release of the DOS version that I think was I think the Mac version came out at the same time, or rather when the Mac version came out they released this repackaged version for DOS, which according to Jordan Mechner is when the popularity of this game really took off. It's kind of interesting. Like it was critically acclaimed, but the sales apparently didn't really take off until this version came out, which is interesting considering it must have already been like fairly successful in Japan with all these different Japanese ports. Although I'm sure some of the previous releases kept selling, like the Amiga version probably kept selling for years as well. Let's see, game details. Game number 13 is the Macintosh version. Developed by Presage. I don't know what this word is or how it's pronounced, but they make software. Can I fit this? Just barely. Just barely. I believe this is how Arsis are credited in the game itself. Arsis being the developer of the PC98 version, which was the basis for the one we just played. The Mac version looks fairly different, but you will come to understand, I guess, what additional graphics means, because it's funny. I mean, it's just a phrasing, but it's really kind of Arsis made the graphics, and then the developers of the Mac port came in and did some additional graphics on top of that to kind of, in my opinion, make it look worse. But they couldn't really just use the PC98 graphics as they were anyway. Excuse me. Let's see. Because of, you know, the color depth and everything. However, the 640 by 400 resolution was a better fit for the Mac than, you know, the original Apple II graphics or the DOS or whatever. So I presume it must have come from that. Now, logistically and sort of rights-wise and everything, I find it very interesting when these things happen. When, like, a game is released for a platform, it's ported by some other company someplace else, and then some other company uses the other group's graphics or assets into a totally different port by a different publisher. Stuff like that happens occasionally. I'm always intrigued with how it comes about, with like how the developers were able to access these assets and how they had the rights to them and everything. So I do find it interesting, even if ultimately I think the Mac version, I think it's just kind of a crude, you know, clearly they took the PC98 graphics and then they kind of filled in more colors on top of them. Trying to think of another example, something like, I was gonna say Super Mario All-Stars, which I don't like the look of that game, but I think it's more competent, I think maybe like re-skinning than this game is. Maybe Ninja Gaiden Trilogy on the Super Nintendo is a better example of where they took the NES graphics and just like tried to add some colors to it. But it always is a bit weird when you take graphics that are kind of very much designed for a certain color palette, or does, you know, for a certain color depth, and then you add more color to it. Because a lot of the time, those original graphics are going to have plenty of artistic choices made within them that were made very specifically because of the circumstances and the limitations that they were designed under. So when you just like have, like in this case, 256 colors to replace, you know, what was there. Yeah, you don't need dithering, but the dithering also kind of added a certain grit and texture to it that is basically missing in this version. Now, I don't think the Mac version looks atrocious or anything, but as a kid, I thought it was like, oh wow, it's such a fancy, upgraded version of Prince of Persia. He's got a turban and everything, like all these details. But when you look at it, like, I think it's a, given what they could do, it's the most pedestrian, like super basic paint by numbers, like version of like adapting the PC98 graphics. It doesn't, to my eye, have any of the sort of panache or style of the original graphics. Like, I think of it as, whenever I see someone who like isn't particularly artistically skilled taking like a black and white, you know, a scan from a manga or some artwork or something, and like try to fill in colors, and you know, it might not look awful, but it's not like elevating the original, and in some cases certainly detracting from it. And I think this is a bit of that case. That's how I remember it anyway. It's been a bit since I actually looked at these graphics, but it'll all come back to me as soon as we start playing, I'm sure. So let's do it. Let's get rid of these jams. Let's see. I guess I should capture this, and there's going to be a crop filter set up. This does not look right at all. Oh, this is actually probably... Oh, okay. Let me... do this. Because I think it runs in like this weird little window. Yeah. That's definitely not correct. Did I do... Well, that's certainly not... How do I... Okay, bear with me. I had this like all set up, and I had notes for what to do here, and I'm following my notes. And it's clearly not correct here. Let me just check. I don't think, because I don't think I can configure anything different here. Yeah. Let me double check if I had a different... capture. Nope. Trying to figure out if I didn't look into... I've set this all up in advance, but it was several months ago. So, maybe... this... No, but that doesn't make sense. Alright, okay, we'll just redo the crop. Unless I had it in some kind of... maybe I magnified it. That might be... Now this is looking more this is looking more correct. All right, there we go. Oh yeah, timer. So this is like the, you know, the DOS graphics kind of cranked up in size and sort of splotchily Xbox Live Arcade smoothed out. Which is like, you know, mostly kind of unobjectionable. Like the text looks nice and sharp. Like, oh my god, this is so like... Again, it doesn't look awful, but it looks like the PC98 version looks so like artistic and like expressive, and this by comparison is so like pedestrian, childlike, fucking finger crayons. Like, again, like it's the most sort of literal plain adaptation of those graphics. Like all these little gradients of shading on the character sprites, you can kind of make out those gradients on the PC98 sprites. It's not necessarily invented whole cloth in this version. However, again, how they sort of took those decisions, or sort of where they, like, the fact that there's some degree of kind of gradient detail with the limited color palette is like crazy enough in the PC98 version, but it's also like those artists who did those sprites, if they had more colors to work with, there's no way they would actually do it that way. Yeah, graphics by Marcella Evans, Gail Rothbaum, and Arsis Software. But I think there's also, like, it's funny because it's like, yeah, it's more color, but it's also a weird kind of mismatch where in some ways this feels like it's like higher fidelity when it kind of isn't. But it's also peculiar because the game itself is not based on the PC98 version. Like, this is the DOS version, but with these, like, HD-ified Xbox Live Arcade adapted PC98 graphics. So it's a little bit of a strange mix. And again, it's like an acceptable, fine version of the game, mostly. I am running a patched version of it that's patched to run at the correct speed, because apparently the retail release of this was just, like, has a bug. It's like Metal Slug 2, it's just, like, accidentally they put too much slowdown in it or whatever. So this runs at a more correct speed. And at least with that, like, it's fine. But hopefully you can kind of see where I'm coming from, where I get a little annoyed when people hold this version up. It's like, oh, the Mac version's so cool, the graphics are so fancy. It's like, well, are they though? Like, everything's relative, of course. I mean, sure, by most metrics, these graphics are more fancy than, like, the Apple II version, or, you know, a higher resolution than the DOS version or whatever. But I think as far as... I think it's like such a... You would only arrive at that position, in my mind, if you have a very sort of clinical, mathematical approach to gauging, which I guess is what you have if you're using the word fidelity, but like the expressiveness and visual interest and like compellingness of the presentation is, to me, like even lower than the DOS version, because I complained about the DOS version before about how it's sort of, it's fine, it's perfectly adequate, it's perfunctory, and it's not bad. Like, the sound effects are awesome. Like, there's a lot of good things about the approach they took with the DOS version. I'm not dissatisfied with it, but I think when you compare it to some of the other ones, the DOS version has, like, as far as the tile sets and sprites, like the intro screens and stuff like that, they look nice, but the in-game graphics of the DOS version have a very pedestrian, mundane sort of look to them, and sort of they could have taken much bigger swings without necessarily feeling like they betrayed the original or did something totally different. And I think the relationship between these graphics and the PC98 ones are similar to the relationship between the DOS graphics and the Atari or the Apple II graphics. But I think the Apple II graphics inherently, by their nature, leave more room for interpretation than the PC98 graphics do. I like Karateka. I'm not like super duper deeply intimate with it. I only really played the Famicom version growing up, but I did buy the Making of Karateka, which is really awesome. And that doesn't have everything. It doesn't have the Famicom version in it, for one. But I think it's a little bit of a less interesting exploration for sure, for a number of reasons, not least because there's fewer versions. But I never streamed that, and I might at some point. Anyway, we're on a little bit of a time crunch, as I mentioned before, so, oh yeah, we have to, because it's Mac, we have to hit Command-N for new game. Start the timer. So the sound effects, of course, are all from the DOS version. But it's so weird and interesting. Like, it's such a strange dichotomy with the little PC98 potion bottles. And even, like, the coloration of them feels sort of... Like, there are these little vestigial remnants of, like, PC98 artistry in this game. And to me, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. Like the way those potion bottles were colored. Like, I do think the tiles look pretty nice. They're probably like the least objectionable part of the graphics. The little goofy face on the skeleton's pretty much intact. Missing the dithering. Yeah, like I said, you know, the dithering isn't just... It's not like a flaw, an error to be fixed. And especially, and I guess, again, that's sort of true for the DOS version as well. Like, when you have this increased color depth, you know, it's not that it's like, oh, you're obliged to use as much color as possible. In fact, I think the restraint shown in the coloration of the tiles is actually quite good. Even if more color variation would have been nice, especially with, you know, different palettes and different levels and what have you. Based on the original, of course, so no music. You see those little skulls, like... I feel like whenever the graphics... No jingle when the doors open. Oh. When the graphics were intricate enough that translating them directly didn't leave a lot of room to make it look flat and plain. Like, it actually kind of looks cool. Or it holds up much better. But then in other places, like, the characters with these, like, black outlines and these, like, big, flat primary colors, like the shading on the turbine looks kind of... Like, it's just not... To me, I feel very strongly that the artists who worked on the Mac version are, like, of a completely different caliber from the artists who actually created these graphics originally. This is not digital rights management. This is physical rights management. But luckily, I have a physical shorthand for this. Let's see. Page 3. First letter of word 4 online. It's like not in the same order. Word 4, line 1, page 3 is an A. Of course, it's all the way up there. So if you drink the wrong potion, you take 2 damage, I think. So you have like 2 chances. Yeah, so the first level acts is like a little bit of a demo. There's kind of a similar thing in Prince of Persia 2. I'm actually not entirely sure how timer works. I'm not sure if it might have paused the timer. I'm like reading chat while doing combat. Yeah, you can see that, like the potion mist cloud. It's such a strange, like, when you hear the little musical jingles and stings that are from the original and not, especially having just played the Japanese version, it like the graphics feel so out of place in a weird way. And again, it's not that on its face that this looks absolutely atrocious, but it's like such a kind of uninteresting, flavorless adaptation of those graphics. I'd be somewhat curious to see... Yeah, scooting actually works nicely in this version. As far as like the individual tile maps for the level, you know, as in where they put each tile. This is interesting. The potion, or the poison rather, is like gray and orange instead of pure red. It's actually a much more subtle difference than in most other versions. Like as far as the little, like the level layouts are the same, but I don't know offhand if the little decorations, you know, you can see that there's like the background is mostly blank, but here and there they have these little bricks and the torch. I'm sure this version is completely faithful to the DOS version with that stuff, but I'm not sure offhand if the PC98 version actually made more changes and embellishments to that kind of stuff. I feel like it might, which would also contribute to this version feeling a little extra plain, sort of because it wouldn't have any of those. But I actually don't really know. It's strange too that, like, having just played the other version with music, it feels... the atmosphere feels kind of empty without it, even though, you know, that was something that they added on top of the original game. Didn't have music originally. Jump works correctly. Yeah, so I do think, Fluffy Quack, that the tile variation, I think, is faithful, so to speak, to the PC98 version. Because there's, like, higher sort of fidelity, pixel density, whatever, as well as, like, more noise and texture, they would have sacrificed, like, number of tile variations. Which is, admittedly, you know, to its detriment. So it makes sense that if they were, like, you kind of get the worst of both worlds, right? You're copying tile maps and layouts from a planar version. but that version actually had a bit of variety that is missing now because the actual graphics for those tile variations just like isn't present. Because I do remember pointing that out. We didn't talk about it today. That sound effect's a lot better than what we heard in the FM Towns one. But when we were playing more other versions previously, the complete lack of tile variation in the PC98 version did, like on a screen like this, like it's quite noticeable. And that's definitely, to my recollection anyway, something that was kind of addressed in like the Super Nintendo version and the Mega Drive version. Oops. Enemies overall seem more aggressive in the Japanese versions. Well, I'm kind of curious about this. Whoa! Yep, I guess we can... Forgot that that's how this works, but... There we go. See ya. I know you can goad him off screen like that, but I forgot. I wasn't ready for him to immediately advance like that. Of course, sound and music is going to be kind of weird in a way on Mac because I guess it would all be so this is interesting. This doesn't feel much like the PC98 graphics at all, actually. Or at least there's more sort of visual interpretation happening here. Because first of all, it was all kind of gray. But I think these, like, the stone tiles look a little... I don't know, it looks fine, I guess, but... Interesting. Of course, have the Technicolor guard here. I do... Well, okay, never mind. I was going to say, I do appreciate not having the big full-screen flash, but I guess we kind of did. But even the little hit sparks have these, like, outlines. They look kind of goofy. I mean, they look kind of goofy in some other versions, too, but they look even goofier here. Like, there's something about... We talked about this at length when we were talking about the adaptation of the Apple II graphics, comparing, like, the DOS version and the Atari ST version, etc. There's this guy. And, again, how this, like the DOS version, take this, like, very plain, perfunctory approach to a lot of things. And I think the little hit sparks are a great example of that. When you have, like, 4 colors and you create this, like, big, bold shape, like, not only do you have 4 colors on the Apple II, but you don't have a lot of processing power and, like, just not a lot of means for visual feedback. That's a weird look. He's just gray. Huh. Like, you have these big, bold sparks. Like, the game running in such a low frame rate and everything it is. Like, it makes perfect sense in the original game. where you take those like big shapes, and what they do here is they sort of draw a black line around the shape and try to add some kind of shading to it. Like it looks so strange. Like it works in the sense that you can tell when you land a hit, but it's not like, it doesn't look or feel as satisfying as it does in, like, I don't know, I think to me these are like some of the worst looking ones. And there just is something particular about when you take something ambiguous with some room for interpretation and you make it like, or not even when you, I was going to say when you make it literal, it's more that when you have a higher fidelity, you almost have to make it literal. And that's again, I think, like the flatness of the character graphics in the DOS version kind of works. And that's not really, like the lack of sort of shading and detail on the characters is not chief among my complaints with the graphics in that version. That I do think manages to retain some of what was interesting about the Apple II graphics. So they kind of showed a bit of wise restraint there, perhaps. But in general, like when you add fidelity, you have to make decisions about how you're going to choose to interpret ambiguous details. Or in some cases, maybe, you know, filling in sort of a relatively blank canvas with something. And even, you know, even the choice not to fill in a canvas with something becomes a choice, and it becomes a visual expression of something that would have been something else had you chosen a different path. So yeah, like, you know, things like the black outlines, especially on the like the hit sparks, seem so ridiculous. But even on these torches and some other things, like there's a kind of a crudeness to, and again, a very literal kind of artless interpretation, if I can be so rude. The vowel. So there's like, yeah, you can see the princess, like the way her tiara is kind of drawn and like the folds in her dress. Like, because even if, like, I'm sure many of those details are very much straight from the PC98 sprites, those clean lines were not only kind of embedded in a sea of dithering, it's also they kind of, there are other factors to the graphics that, like, the shading detail on this guy's leg, like the weird pillow shading on his leg, I think that's mostly there in the PC98 version too, but it's like you could only do so much when you have to use dithering, whereas here you don't really have that excuse. CDI ass looking game. Yeah, I guess that's not entirely unfair. Dirty caveman that thinks the game looks fine. Yeah, I think the game looks fine. Like I said before too. There we go, we got to witness this at least. No color variation in the tiles in this version. Looks great for a Macintosh game, might be its other, you know, its own can of worms. Thanks. I want to say I've had this happen in other versions too. Oh, we got through it at least. All right, sure. I remember that happening in, I think maybe the PC Engine version, where it's like the preemptive whole string was happening when it shouldn't, but the enemy was still active, so he would just kill me. Here, he at least let me jump through, so that's nice. I do kind of like that the enemy guards do have such color variation. I think that's mostly there in the DOS version too. See, that's how I normally do that. And we can just scoot through. That is one of the most satisfying things in this entire game, especially with that little sound effect. It's so good. But yeah, to try to explain further what I mean, like, there's a difference between fidelity and art. You know, I think one big problem with discussing visuals in video games historically is that there's often a conflation between artistic expression, you know, technical achievement, and fidelity. You know, fidelity doesn't mean detail. Fidelity means essentially the potential for detail. By immediate technical definition, a higher amount of pixels on screen equals higher fidelity. A higher amount of colors on screen equals higher fidelity. I would argue that higher refresh rate, higher frame rate equals higher fidelity. And you could point to other things like motion clarity or contrast and black levels or whatever, I'm sure. You know, you could say, I mean, so fidelity in itself isn't something that's like has a strict exact definition across like different games or consoles or whatever, but like you could say something like the ghosting on the original Game Boy screen is pretty bad. So if you play a Game Boy game on a Game Boy Light or a Game Boy Pocket with a better screen, it's like the fidelity has been improved, even if the graphical assets are the same. But that's a kind of esoteric edge case. Normally, you would more commonly, let's see, no visual effect, so boring. But I think that's the same as the DOS version. I think the DOS version also doesn't have a screen effect of any kind. Fucking Resident Evil Director's Cut basement ass music. Jesus. But I find the distinction between fidelity and artistic expression in particular very important to distinguish, because I think when I was talking about that conflation, you know, it's when people talk about better graphics, like good graphics, like the PlayStation has better graphics than the Super Nintendo because 3D is more graphics than 2D. The PS3 has better graphics than the PS2 because 720p is more graphics than 480i. And I think people could easily make similar arguments for this version of Prince of Persia having quote-unquote better graphics than the DOS version. Certainly the Apple version, because it's 640 by 480 and it's 256 colors. I mean, generally, I tend to never really want to talk about good graphics, because graphics, like, it's immediately ambiguous what you're talking about. So I prefer to talk about the art. This game has good art. I like the art in this game. I like the visuals of this game. And if something is, I mean, that's not to diminish, you know, technical effort or execution. I think there are games that are technically impressive and can be cool and interesting and worthwhile discussing for that, you know, for those merits. But talking about like art direction and artistic expression and technical execution and like innovation in the same breath as though they're like the same thing gets kind of weird in my opinion. I think those are, I mean, sure, two sides of the same coin, in that like tech and art both obviously contribute to the final result of like the visuals. But because they're two different things, it's I don't know, just to take some kind of example, if we're talking about music or sound, you know, composition, orchestration, even like recording quality, they're all different aspects, but it would be kind of weird in a way to talk about them as if they're the same. And to me, I guess to me it's like a sign of poor understanding or insight. I should have maybe snuck, but this is why I usually don't bother, because you can fight this guy fine anyway. Yeah, and I mean, of course, there's like there's massive amounts of subjectivity to all of this as well, where like, what do you value? What does it matter? What effect does it have? See, I had much less problems ending up at the right side of this tile than I did in the FM Towns version, by the way. And of course, as you can probably tell, I have a pretty massive chip on my shoulder about not necessarily people who prefer like fidelity or, you know, the technical aspects over the artistic aspects, even though like kind of that, but more so specifically the conflation willingly or otherwise all these things, and sort of dismissing the kind of artistic merit of something on account of its, you know, technical fidelity or lack thereof. And I mean, I think everyone who's grown up playing games has been guilty of that at some point, right? I feel like it doesn't happen so much nowadays when there's such diminishing returns, not to mention the whole sort of market is much more flattened, where you have things like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, video games as a medium just looked different. Like, if you checked in on video games once a year, video games just looked different because the technical development happened so rapidly, as well as, of course, like the skills of developers evolving, tools becoming better. There were a lot of factors, but I think it's not super weird that this like sort of conflation started happening, because oftentimes there was a degree of, you know, better graphics were synonymous in a way with technical evolution, because technical evolution happened, you know, perhaps in parallel with more sophisticated artistic expression. But I think it's like, I think you could even, I mean, you can even boil it down further and say that, like, there's plenty of games that I like the way they look, even though I think they're, you know, maybe not ugly, but like I can assess the technical execution of artistic elements. Like I can recognize and acknowledge that something is not particularly refined, but still enjoy it for whatever reason. I can see glaring flaws in something, but still like what it's going for enough that they don't bother me. Like there can be something that I can critique and point out a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that something equivalent that doesn't have those exact flaws is better or more appealing to me, because it could be less appealing on a different level in totally different ways. So like more refinement, even artistically, if we can use that expression, doesn't necessarily mean... That's how you do that screen. Better graphics. Like, at the end of the day, quote-unquote better graphics, I think, is just an unhelpful way of looking at things. Just glad that snobbery against 2D has gone away now that we have everything. To be perfectly frank, I think that's a little bit of an optimistic take. I do think that we're in a better place for it, and I think, like, generationally, like, people aren't growing up, and haven't for a long time been growing up with that perception that we had, if you're around my age, of, you know, new tech equals new graphics, and fancy new things are more exciting and better. Because, like I said, you know, not only because of the rapid technical advancement, but just the way, like, things didn't stay on the market and weren't relevant for as long a time as some things are. Obviously, a lot of things come and go very quickly. But most of the biggest games in the world currently are like 10 years old or older, you know? And are not necessarily, like, if anything, you look at, you know, Roblox and Fortnite and whatever else, if anything characterizes them is that they're not cutting edge, or even, like, downright ugly. It's interesting, by the way, in this version, because it's like the DOS version, I guess, the upside down potion actually is green. It doesn't look like a health extension like it did in the the Japanese version. And the thing is, like, I mean, I get what you're saying, Konga, and I don't disagree. Like, I don't disagree that there's, like, been a positive development. Yeah, the tile layout here is slightly different with the above the gate there. And I think maybe the phrasing is different. But at the same time, you get a game like Metroid Dread coming out, and there were a very non-insignificant number of people who were kind of, like, up in arms that it was a $60 game. Because, like, oh, this, you know, it looks like a, you know, it's a 2D game, so therefore, you know, I will not pay more than $20 per D or whatever, you know. And that, I think that it all comes down to the same way of thinking. Or, like, Terminator 2D, oh, this game's awesome, but it's only 90 minutes long, so therefore I didn't like it. Or whatever. Like, oh, you know, I haven't finished it yet, but I heard it's only 90 minutes, so it's pretty poor value. And, like, you know, you get a lot of weird, dumb, reductive arguments like that, and I think a lot of that is still rooted in a completely misguided sense of, in a way, entitlement, but more so, like, this idea that that any part of games is like a linear progression, where anything that is more like it is now is better than what it used to be, because old is bad and new is good. And I think that can express itself in a lot of different ways. Whether it's talking about 3D is better than 2D, or, you know, high resolution is better than low resolution, or pixels should be fewer dollars than polygons. Or whatever. I guess I don't need that. This playthrough has been a lot smoother than the previous one. I do think this game is running a little bit slower than the game speed I had the FM Towns version on. Enemies do seem, for sure, a little less aggressive here. And of course, I got to warm up with the other playthrough. That's not too surprising. Oh yeah, you don't need to drop that tile in the other version, I think. I'm not going to get into the whole hours argument. I've felt like I made that rant about 400 times on this channel. I mean, it'll come back. We'll get there again, I'm sure. I just don't have it in me currently. But again, I think it's an expression of something very similar. I mean, it's what everything comes back to. But I think it's very similar to the idea of like certain kinds of graphics being inherently superior to other types of graphics. All right, I've got 29 minutes here, so let's go for the health extension this time. Sorry, I'm just fully mesmerized by Prince of Persia taking up like 80% of my brain power, and the other 20% dedicated to ranting. So I'm not doing a good job reading chat. But welcome new viewers. This is the Macintosh version from 1992. I've been mostly spending the last 35 minutes discussing how I don't like the graphics. How, while it is technically more fancy than certain other versions by certain metrics, it is not a particularly artistically expressive version, in my opinion. But it's totally fine. It doesn't look ugly, and it doesn't play poorly. So certainly in the good half of the good and bad Prince of Persia ports sort of binary separation. Yeah, I mean, civil debates and discussion are always it's always welcome. I mean, I'm used to people disagreeing with me because I have very esoteric tastes, and my sort of preferences and ideals when it comes to video games and graphics are not typically shared with I guess at least anything we could generously describe as the mainstream. I think, you know, ultimately it comes down to, I mean, this is my personal take. Knowing how you feel about certain things and why is like the most interesting thing. Like, if someone can convince me of something because I agree with their reasoning or whatever, that's cool, that's fine. But whether I am of a similar opinion or not, like, I'd be more interested in someone putting forth an argument I disagree with in a compelling way than an argument I agree with in a completely flat way. If that makes sense. And I think as far as what we're talking about with, like, obsession with technical stuff and graphical fidelity or whatever over artistry, in my mind, that often comes paired with a sort of poor level of understanding, a poor ability to articulate thoughts and feelings, that altogether sort of manifests as, at least as I perceive it, a kind of thoughtlessness and mindlessness. And that's why I don't really care for it. Obviously, I mean, that's my personal taste and bias bleeding over into that too. But that's how I can feel about it. Arkham Origins, best, not just the best Arkham game, it's the best Batman game. Those are the facts. I will struggle to read that wall of text, I'm afraid. Imaginary exponent, I'll try. Well, I think I'm trying to skim your comment. What I'm getting at is increased fidelity is an improvement. And I mean, I agree that, like, I don't mean to say that the development of well, I got to hear the death scream. That the develop, was that our first death? Might have been. I'm not like against the development of technology, or I see it as a bad thing. I don't think well, okay. See, now my brain power is shifting. Now it's like 60% Prince of Persia, 30% forming a sentence, and however many percent are left trying to read chat. That's okay. We got 20, 30 something minutes. I don't think VGA is better or worse than EGA or whatever. I think every set of technical circumstances bring with them their own capabilities for expression, and you could certainly make the argument that certain hardware platforms or standards created an atmosphere in which the type of stuff that was more commonly produced were of a certain style or vibe that some people might find more preferable. To make a very simple case, I would say that on like strict averages, I probably find PS2 games more pleasing to look at than PS3 games. But the thing is, like, by and large, there's nothing on the PS3 that, like, made PS2 graphics impossible to produce. It was more down to artistic decisions and, I mean, more realistically, market forces that would create trends that went in different directions. So I think the original Prince of Persia on the Apple II looks kind of awesome. In a way that isn't matched by any other version. Is it the best looking version? I don't know, it's not a contest. But it has a unique appeal to it, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like, thanks. I think I've had that happen in other versions too, where because he wasn't in an idle state when I sheathed the sword, like it didn't take, so he was still in combat mode. Still funny. So I mean, you can definitely say that, like, Yeah, sure. And I don't disagree that like increased capability is great because it strictly hasn't eliminated choices. There's countless interesting indie games being made for Steam like every day. And I think there's a super cool breadth and depth of artistic expressions being explored. I think as far as like mainstream AAA gaming, it's never been more boring, and it's been like a pretty seamless gradual transition towards boringness over the past like 30 years. But that's not, you know, video games don't begin and end with that. Doesn't have to anyway. So I think it's like I'm not arguing that higher fidelity is worse, but that different degrees of fidelity are inherently different, and you cannot translate something from one degree of fidelity to another without transforming it. And whether that transformation results in something you find more or less appealing is going to be completely subjective for the most part. But I definitely take issue with the idea that... There we go. Mashed down a little too hard. Which I'm not saying it's an argument being put forth by anyone in chat, but certainly, you know, is being expressed broadly, pretty generally, that higher fidelity is inherently better. And I don't think that's true. Especially the idea of like taking something and redoing it in higher fidelity will make it better. But it also depends on what we're talking about. The Royal Guard, Jafar, just hanging out in the top floor dungeon. I think for the most part, like 3D games, there's certainly a lot more cases where 3D games can just be rendered at a high resolution and still like look nice, and in some ways you could argue look better than they had been rendered at lower resolution. But in those cases, it's usually a matter of the same artistic expression coming through in a different way, perhaps a little more clearly. Certainly, if you have to redo all the art, like it can be done. I haven't played it, so I don't have an opinion on it, but I know that the Metroid Prime remake for the Switch was very well received. People say that looked amazing, it was great. We did it. But for the most part, when you, like, anytime you have to redo graphics, it's just a different thing. So it's not a matter of, like, it being the same but better or the same but worse. It's just a different thing. I think, like, I think EGA to VGA is like a super interesting transition. 18 minutes left. Pretty good. Because I think, I don't know, I guess because the first place my mind goes is to, like, Sierra. And I guess, to a degree, LucasArts as well, but Sierra developed such a cool style with their late... I mean, I guess maybe... I forget the very technical definitions. Maybe it was some form of VGA, whatever, but, like, the 16-color games from the late 80s, like Conquest of Camelot, Space Quest 3, Leisure Suit Larry 2, Police Quest 2, kind of, I guess. But like that period of Sierra like was such a massive step above their previous games. And when they transitioned to the 256 color VGA graphics, the transition, and again, that's, you know, what I'm unhappy with in that transition was the artistic shift. I think artistically, they're like painted, rotoscoped games. To me, I don't know how I felt 20, 30 years ago. I don't remember. But now I think they generally, like, I think Space Quest 3 looks way more appealing than Space Quest 4. I think Quest for Glory 2 looks awesome. I think Quest for Glory 3 and 4 are kind of blech. Like, they're not poorly executed or even ugly, but I prefer the crisp, like, pixel detail of the older games. And there's nothing to say they couldn't have maintained that sort of style using higher fidelity. But I think ultimately that really is what I'm kind of arguing, you know, that higher fidelity can create pitfalls for sort of accidentally creating something that is of less visual appeal. Yeah, Gold Rush is an awesome looking game for sure. For sure. So yeah, I know, so my argument there isn't that VGA is uglier or makes it look worse or anything. I just, like, with more, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like, when you have the room to do things, you can more easily, you know, I used to teach 3D graphics, and the way I would boil it down was that, like, don't make the mistake of adding too much geometry to your 3D models. Like, when you're learning to model, you're better off keeping as few polygons as possible. Every vertex that you place needs to be where it's supposed to be for things to look good. Thank you very much for 100 megabits, Space Hoppercopter, appreciate that. Any one vertex can end up in the right or wrong spot, and if you have like 36 vertices, that's 36 chances to fuck up, and if you have 500 vertices, that's 500 chances to fuck up. And I think you can apply that in general, like, certainly when people are teaching or learning pixel art, one of the first like beginner mistakes that people are taught to avoid is to, like, don't make a gigantic canvas. Like, you should be working with far fewer pixels and far fewer colors than you think. And the limitation and frustration you might feel doing that is kind of misplaced in a sense, because ultimately trying to solve that by increasing the scope will only make things more difficult. So that's kind of what that comes down to. I don't know, I'm trailing off and also realizing we need to wrap things up here. So let's do that, and let's no, that's there we go. Shut down our virtual mini Mac and bring up the game list. We did it. Yeah, I completely agree that higher fidelity allows for a wider range of expression. I've certainly never argued against that, but I think more higher fidelity, a larger scope, just takes like exponentially more work kind of to get it right. I'm not big into Here's a Might of Magic. I can't really speak to those games in particular, but I'm sure I could come up with a number of games where, like, you could look at it in any number of ways. Like, I think, well, ultimately, I think we're sort of, I don't think we're in disagreement per se. I think we're looking at it, focusing on slightly different things, because I haven't really disagreed with anything you've said. Anyway, let's try to get this done. But it's been fun. I mean, I there's a reason why these types of conversations come up again and again. It's because I can't help myself ranting about these things, and I have very strong thoughts and feelings about it. Macintosh version done. We did it. We completed it. Pretty effortlessly, dare I say. As far as a review, I think, let's see. Nope, that's not appropriate. Let's see here. I think that's appropriate. Just a pretty mellow, smiling face. It's positive, not too expressive, not too emotive, not too extreme. Just very modestly. Yep, it's fine. It's positive. It's good. But I don't think, just reflecting on it now, I really don't think I would choose to play this version over any other good version, really. Other than the novelty of it, really. Because I feel like for everything about this version that I like, or appreciate, or think is good, there's like some other version that does the same thing at least as good, if not better. There's nothing that really stands out. Like, I feel like I would probably rather, well, there's no probably about it. I prefer the DOS version over this. Like, I think it maybe feels a little snappier, and I think there's enough about the graphics in the Mac version that I find slightly off-putting or annoying. Like, it sort of draws attention to itself in ways that I don't really like. And I think they are more kind of amateurish. To me, the DOS version, and the DOS version, again, isn't even really one of the more appealing looking ones to me, but it's the like straightest point of comparison, I guess. But it's a perfectly fine version. I played the Mac version growing up. It wasn't like the primary version that I played, but I definitely played it. I liked it. It's fine. It's good. But I think visually, the Japanese versions are so much cooler. I mean, especially because you get the music and the atmosphere. You get the whole package. Like, the Mac version sort of just takes 20% of the Japanese PC version. Xbox Live Arcadeifies it a little bit and then puts it on the DOS version, but it kind of runs a little worse. It plays well. It's adequate. It's perfectly acceptable, but it doesn't bring anything unique to the table. Like, I think the art would be the one thing that you could argue is like what it brings to the table, because the graphics are different from every other version, but the graphics are also the one thing that to me is like the same but worse as the Japanese PC version. So yes, up next will be the Super Famicom game. And we will likely, I would say, dedicate a stream to it because it's a much longer game. I have previously committed to completing a full playthrough of that in a single sitting, which will not happen on the first attempt. But that will not be the next stream, because we will finish this whole exploration project and then we will return. We'll circle back to the Super Famicom Prince of Persia, because I fear that challenge might take a while. So I just don't want to get stuck on the Super Nintendo game for like 2 months before we finish everything else up. And I feel pretty confident in saying that we will not finish it on our first go, because it is difficult, and it's especially difficult towards the end. I played through the game most recently. Did we play it on my birthday last year? I know that I've played it on my birthday stream. Whenever it was, I definitely didn't finish it the most recent time, and I made a mental note of the fact that especially the last couple of stages are going to need some practice and maybe even note-taking to make sure I can get through it smoothly. I have a lot of thoughts about the Super Nintendo game. I think it's excellent. It's a very good game in its own right, but I would never recommend it to someone asking what's the best version of Prince of Persia, because it's not really the same game. It's a different game, and I would recommend it to someone after they have completed, like, if someone can finish in a single sitting, like any of the good ports of the original, whether it's the DOS version, the Mega CD version, the Mac version, PC98, doesn't really matter. But if you're comfortable enough with the game to finish it in one sitting, then I would absolutely recommend the Super Nintendo game, because it's basically Prince of Persia for super players. It's way harder, and I think you will have a much better time with it if you have experienced the original, like, not only in terms of like appreciating the cool things it does, but sort of you'll have a better time tackling the challenge it presents to you. But we'll discuss that more when we get to it. Now we have to wrap things up. But this has been a lot of fun. Appreciate the discussion. We have a lot of people tuning in, which I appreciate. People clamor for more Prince of Persia, and it's a sign of good taste. This is one of the best video games ever made, in my estimation. Certainly one of my absolute favorite games. In fact, if I had to boil it down, gun to my head, a singular favorite game of all time, I think I'd probably say Prince of Persia. It's very, very good. Thoughts on Prince of Persia 2? Playing and make you sick? Might as well. I don't know. I don't like it. Quite frankly, I don't have time to get into it because I really need to go. But I would certainly like to revisit it at some point. Maybe when there's a version that's like actually properly functional, that someone makes, I'll play it. But no promises. But yeah, happy Easter, I guess, if you celebrate. And I'll be back with more Prince of Persia, maybe at some point in the weekend. I'm not entirely sure. But I will... I'll figure that out when I can. I'll post on Discord, hopefully, if I remember. And I'll see you guys in the future. We're going to rate Hysteric Moon. It's continuing their Mega Drive Odyssey. And currently attempting to beat Echo the Dolphin in one swimming. That seems thematically appropriate of a rate. So yeah, thank you very much for hanging out. I'll see you guys around. Take care, and goodbye.